right, we'll now call this retreat to order at 12:31 p.m. I am the chair, Dr. Carmen Sultan, and I'm present. When I call your name, please indicate if you are present. Vice Chair Utz.
Present.
Board Member Anderson. Not present. Board Member Herndon. Also not present. Board Member Earrier.
Present.
Board retreats offer opportunities for the board to engage in more in-depth analysis of data, engage in discussion, and access relevant information. Retreats are offered quarterly and are open to the public. Dr. Whitaker, please introduce the first item.
Dr. Sultan, before introducing the first item, we would like to remove the executive session item from the agenda. It was a personnel matter that is not required to be discussed.
Perfect. Do I have a motion to remove the executive session for the purpose of discussing a personnel matter?
I'm not making that motion.
So moved.
Member Earrier makes the motion. Is there a second?
No.
Yeah, let's keep it then. I want to know.
You can make the motion, Dr.
Okay, I'll second. The pending question is the adoption of the motion to remove executive session. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, since this requires a recorded vote. Dr. Whitaker will call the roll. Board members, when your name is called, please respond with aye if you are in favor, no if you are opposed, and abstain if you wish to remain neutral. Dr. Whitaker, please proceed.
Chair Sultan.
Aye.
Vice Chair Utz.
Nay.
Board Member Anderson.
Not present.
Board Member Herndon.
Also not present.
Board Member Earrier.
Present.
No.
Oh, sorry. Vote for.
For the motion on the table, which is to amend the agenda to remove executive
I
session.
want to know, so no. I know I'm giving conflicting.
Okay, the discussion time is passed. You have to vote.
Change my vote. No.
So
The Chair Sultan, the tally stands 1 aye, 2 noes, 0 abstentions. Noes.
okay, then the noes have it. And just for the record, you were the one who brought up the quality of executive session for retreats, which is why
I was just asking for the topic.
Okay. So the first item on the agenda is governance. I would like to call on Dr. Robert Avosa. Dr. Avosa is from K-12 Leadership Matters and has facilitated board training numerous times with us previously. You may have remembered he's a facilitator who dubbed me as Nora, same as Hans. Carmen was West. Tasha and Jana were both South, and James was East. And then you followed back up with Tracy. And I believe she is sitting in Westwood. That's kind of where.
I'll explain what that means in a minute.
Okay.
Yeah, Lorraine's like, wait, what is that?
What am I again? South?
No, I'll talk with you about
Okay.
this.
All right.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to spend a few minutes with you. As was mentioned, actually, I'll go to this slide real quick. My name's Robert Avosa. I know I have not met you yet. Board Member Earrier, did I get it right? I'm a longtime educator and recovering school superintendent. I spent 25 years in public ed, mostly in South Florida.
Okay.
I also worked in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools as the deputy superintendent in North Carolina while I was getting my doctorate degree, and then became superintendent in Fulton County, Georgia, and then went back to Florida and was superintendent in Palm Beach, where I then stepped down and now support school boards and school board training across the country, as far away as Anchorage, Alaska, as large as Dallas and Charlotte, and as small as Botetourt, Virginia. And so we'll talk a little bit about governance today and the complexity of governing in general, but particularly today in 2026, some of the headwinds that we face with politics and budgets and things, enrollment, et cetera. So I just wanted to personally introduce myself. My family moved to the US as a little kid. I was a little kid, my dad was not. He had 4 children, and I like to share that notion of like the importance of public education in the world we live and how our democracy can really move forward, whether you're born in downtown Atlanta or come from somewhere else, right? It's like the equalizer. It's the place we can all reach agreement that it's only one way to move forward, which is in a positive way. So let's go back. Now, this is an interesting picture. Amazing what AI can do for you. Board members, if I had met you in high school, how would you have introduced yourself? What were you like, Hans?
I'd be that kid with the Nirvana shirt, the black eyeliner,
Oh,
makeup,
okay.
and very, very, very aggressively antisocial.
Okay, so you're part of the antisocial social club, like
Yeah.
my son.
Right.
You ever seen that shirt the kids wear now? It literally says that. I thought that was funny.
I had a shirt that had the happy smiley face with a bullet hole in its head.
Nice. You would have had you on some list. Where did you grow up?
South Georgia, which probably explains the antisocial.
Looking for a place to fit in, found his way.
Yep.
All right, Lorraine, how about you?
I was a nerdy dork, so maybe like this physics kid. And quiet. I was, in sports, not the super athlete, but I always think sports are really important regardless. So that really helped me be part of a team
Yeah.
and all of
And
that.
where did you grow up?
I grew up in South Florida. I'm from West Palm Beach.
Oh, no way.
Like,
I
yeah,
was superintendent in Palm Beach.
I know.
Which high school did you go to?
Okay, so then I moved near Tampa, but
Okay.
I went to elementary school, Winbrook Elementary.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that was in your district, yeah.
Yep. And then you moved to Tampa,
Moved to Tampa and then I came here to go to college
Nice.
at Emory, so, and then I met my
and you
husband, so-
never left. So I
Pretty
also worked in Tampa at
Okay.
Sly Junior High School
Ah.
and then King High School, both in very urban environment.
Okay, then I went to private school, was very blessed. My dad's also an immigrant, and so I went to Tampa Prep.
Okay.
Yeah, you probably know that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, it's amazing. We like to think that the kids today are so different. But the truth is, if I asked all of you that same question, we'd find a way to get to the kids today. How about you, Carmen? How would you have introduced yourself to us in high school?
I'm none of these people.
Okay.
Typical AI, there's no near valedictorian black child of color. So I don't think I'd be any of these kids.
Okay.
Maybe the cheerleader.
Were you into
No, I was not a cheerleader, but I'm thinking maybe she's a little black girl, but I don't see any of these kids that look like me.
Okay.
But I went to a very high achieving Magnet High School. I graduated with almost all A's. But they were
Here in town?
I went to Chamblee High School.
Okay.
High schools. But I don't see any of these.
Yeah, but the intention wasn't to find one that looks like us, but just in general. How would you have described yourself? Sounds like very studious. Did you know what you wanted to do?
Yeah, I always wanted to go into medicine. I knew that when I was in high school, but I also come from a family physician, so I think it was a little bit of difference. But I was also an athlete. I was a swimmer in high school, so I spent a lot. I always came to school with like in a parka with my hair in a bun. Was always up at 5 a.m. I was still up at 5 a.m.
Yeah. Swimmers and gymnastics, those early morning practices. I had a daughter who did both.
Yeah, I still am up at 5 a.m.
Exhausting.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, you're just in time. We are introducing ourselves. Had we met in high school, you don't need to pick a person that looks like you or fits you, but just in
You have
general.
a big hair.
No big hair. The 80s. I married my high school sweetheart, and I always joke with her. She used to, like a lot of the girls, they would have like bangs, but they would puff them out like really high.
And a
Um,
cool.
And just, I don't know what it was called, but it was cute. So having met you in high school, how would you have described yourself?
Probably very similar to now, although My mom likes to say that I think I've become nicer, so, I like to learn, I like to ask questions, I like
Did
to
you know you
push
wanted to
them.
be a teacher?
Oh, absolutely not. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I had studied English at UGA because I like reading and writing, and then in North Ireland, so I went overseas and worked in London and met people teaching, and then went to Greece and taught, and then decided I liked it.
Nice. Cool.
Well,
Well,
and I guess maybe one last thing, kindergarten, I was lining students up, so students were crying, and I wasn't.
I was hoping my daughter or son would be a teacher. Neither have chosen that profession. But you know, we are generally people who care deeply about schools. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. Agreed?
Yeah.
And so when we govern, it gets real messy real quickly. That's what democracy is, whether we like it or not. But we do have to find places where we can coalesce around ideas, thoughts. Sometimes we'll agree, and sometimes we won't agree, right? And unfortunately, it feels like sometimes, well, am I on the winning side or am I on a losing side? And what I want to talk with you a little bit about today is moving away from this concept of winning and losing, but really beginning to think about governing as a team. And so we've got quite a bit of work we're going to do today. You get hours, and I'm now certified in Georgia, so I can give you hours for being here because we're going to be doing some training today. We're going to talk a little bit about what governance is and what it's not, some ins and outs of what that looks like. We're going to talk through what board management oversight is, and we're going to actually walk through your plan. Many of the best school districts and highest achieving school districts in the country use this model of board governance oversight, which allows the board to to check off their obligation to making sure that we're doing what we say we're going to do. We're going to talk a little bit about what strategic planning is and the fact that a plan had been created. We're going to give an update on it. And then also each plan has an arc. It's created, it's implemented, hopefully we get results. And then as we come down the other side of the mountain, we begin thinking about what's the next hill we want to climb. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. The SPLOST referendum, which is always fun. Having been here in Atlanta Metro, it's an unbelievable opportunity for us to be able to invest in our schools. The difference between how Florida funds their schools, what I left here and what I found there was night and day. The eSPLOST is really just a wonderful tool to invest in our buildings. And then semester credit and grading, staff will talk a little bit about that. So to further support board development, we'll connect the GFBA standards that that you all rated yourselves as needs improvement, right? Like any organization, periodically we need to look at ourselves. Staff does the same thing. They do a self-evaluation and then they're evaluated. Here you all looked at yourselves. We're going to go through some of those and then talk about how do we build this plan moving forward. Any questions about those topics? Good? All right. So what is governance? What does that mean?
Is that a rhetorical question?
No, just in general, like we're here, right? You guys are elected school board members. What does governance mean?
Following the laws, rules, the things.
Yeah, some of it's following laws and rules. What else?
It's enacting one of the three functions that we have, right? Managing the superintendent, managing the budget, and setting policy.
The last one, setting policy. So managing, you're right, making sure we're following federal law, state law, but you're also a body that can create policy, right? Superintendent gets your policies and she develops regulations or practices. Each district may use different vernacular, but essentially that's exactly right. Right? And so last time earlier, Lorraine was wondering what the heck this meant. But you remember, Tracy, where you fell. You were here in the West. And basically people who selected themselves in the West were those who really liked detail. They asked who, what, when, where, and why. So before they make a decision at work, or in this case, sitting around the dais, they want to know a lot of the information before they make a decision, right? Some people were very action oriented. These were people who said, hey, let's jump right in. Let's create a list and let's get stuff done, right? None of these are right or wrong. It's just a different approach. And by the way, I forced them to pick one. They couldn't say I'm northeast, just for the sake of the discussion. The east is, these are people who like to go to the 30,000-foot view, and they'd like to consider many different options before they make a selection. Okay, so these spend a lot more time in the detail. These may pick two big like strategies and then think through those different options before they move forward. And then if you live in the South, these were people who said that they care deeply about listening to everybody, making sure that everybody has an opportunity to be heard. They tend to worry a lot because before they make a big decision, they might think, oh gosh, is this going to hurt someone's feelings? Does that make sense? All right. So, Miss Lorraine, not to put you on the spot.
Sorry.
God bless. Not to put you on the spot, but if you had to pick one while you're on the board, do you tend to be more action oriented, more detail oriented, more sensitive and caring deeply about? Now, it doesn't mean you can't be a little bit of each, but I'm just saying for the sake of the discussion, or east, would you like to be speculative, you like to come up here and think about big options?
I think I like to look at it first from the bigger view.
Yeah.
And then I'll probably narrow it, the
Okay.
details to make sense of it.
Do you remember where you were? Do you still feel solid about being in the West?
I mean, I think I have all of them, but yes, I like details.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I have questions.
Hans, have you changed or are you still feeling like?
No, I'm.
Yeah, he's like, come on, man. Let's go. I got it. All right, Ms. Carmen, Dr. Carmen, what, do you still feel like you are living in the West, which is very detail oriented, very precise? I want to know the who, what, when, where, why before we make a decision.
All day, every day.
Okay.
I feel like I could answer that.
He's built like that. You're perfect professional.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right.
Bring
So I like to create visuals. I always tell people, you know, we all create. We have a creation in our mind of what we think something is. If I were to ask you, right, I want you to think of a tree, right? So you're in your mind, you're thinking of a tree. It could be a beautiful green tree. It could be the fall or the spring where the leaves are gone. And so we have to create meaning together. And so I think visuals sometimes help us see how all those things fit together. So in governance, whether you're in Georgia, Texas, Florida, Alaska, anywhere, when you think about governance, you've got this bright line. And oh, by the way, this also could be for Coca-Cola, Home Depot, right? There's a governing board, and then there's a management, which is the CEO, okay? So I want you to think of that green line as the line between governance and operational. So who lives above the line, right? It's you guys, the school board. The elected officials have, in this case, well, one report, but you could have multiple depending on where you are in the country. In Palm Beach, we had a separate, almost like overarching, what's the right term? I forgot what it was. So they had the board attorney, they had the superintendent, and then they had almost an independent auditor because the district was a $4.5 billion organization. So the board actually had 3 employees. In this case, you've got your superintendent, your board attorney, and then you've got the kind of work you can do. You create a vision, mission, sometimes a set of core beliefs and values. We create policies. We talk about goals and targets, and we determine whether or not the goals are met. Make sense? Last time Ms. Bernath was here with me, she asked you the question, how many board members does it take to install a light bulb? I don't know if you guys remember that analogy. And so some of you said, well, it would have to be the majority of us. And the answer was, it's really none. What you do is say, let there be light. And then the superintendent decides, is it going to be fluorescent? Is it going to be incandescent? Is it going to be a candle? Is it going to be an LED light? And then you decide, did the light she picked meet the needs that we established? Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So what about the superintendent? She lives below this line. Actually, there's only one person in this organization that can go above and below the line. It's Dr. Whitaker. She's allowed to come above the line with you, sits at the dais. She doesn't vote, but she can say, look, I'm an education expert. I've got my doctorate degree. I've got a history of increasing results, both in our district and in other districts. I can come up here and work with you above the line on policies that I've read about or that I've researched, or I went and visited, I don't know, Miami-Dade Public Schools, and they were doing something really cool around a policy. I'd love for you to consider that policy, right? Even though she can't vote. Again, everybody still following? Okay. She's got many direct reports. She takes big goals that we say are important. She creates a strategic plan, and then she operationalizes it. Which is, all right, we've got a big bucket of student achievement. Here are the 3 initiatives that we're going to put in place. Here's the budget that I need that you mentioned earlier, Hans, about, we get to support that budget or not. She then operationalizes the vision, the mission, and the policies through regulation. Okay, so this is the most important part. The board is responsible for the what. This is the easiest way to remember this. You guys are responsible for the what, and she and her team are responsible for the how. Okay? Now, some arguments will be like, well, wait a minute, we've got a strategic plan, and I just came onto the school board. And how do I weigh in on the strategic plan? Well, districts apply these in different ways. So when I got my first superintendent's, well, I was a deputy super in Charlotte, we had created for the first year, sort of managing what had already been there. And as it came to a close, Dr. Borman at the time created a 3 or 4 year strategic plan with some priorities. That doesn't mean that while we're working on the strategic plan, there couldn't be some things that come up, right? So 5 years ago, even before you started, I think maybe 4 years ago, the previous superintendent had put together a strategic plan. Did you build that plan?
No.
No. Was anyone on the board? You were on the board at the time?
When we adopted it, the process where it was built, I think
Okay.
started right before.
Yep. And so back then, were you thinking about AI? Like in a big way, like you are now?
I mean, not in a affect schools way.
Correct. We may have been hearing about it. We may have been, hey, what's this all going to mean? But we didn't really know what it was, right? Now, so now today, here we are, 2026. AI is a huge conversation that's being had across the country in schools. We have very little federal policy, that we aren't hearing much about anything on the federal side about how we're going to manage AI. And yet here we are in the public domain trying to figure out how we use this very powerful tool. Right? So the superintendent and her staff are responsible for the how, and you get to decide, are we moving towards that in a meaningful way or not? Okay? Again, I like to keep things simple. The way I look at it is, in order for us to operate as a team, we need to understand the rules of the game, how you keep score, and how much time is on the clock. I love soccer. If you don't know anything about soccer, right away I would give you the rules on how it works. Like my wife has been married to me for 30 years. I've explained offsides to her 50,000 times. I know.
I'm with you, Carmen.
Wait a minute, it looked like you were even.
Oh, she's a soccer.
And it's very straightforward once you know.
But do you see my point?
Yeah.
You got to know the rules of the game, right? In order for us to play this game in a fair way, we have to be able to do this. So there's a referee who helps you manage this. Otherwise, it could be a scrimmage, and you see the kids on the field fighting and arguing about it, right? How do you keep score? Well, in soccer, 1 goal is 1 point. In football, when I moved to this country, it took me forever to figure out, wait a minute, how come that's worth 6 points? This is worth 1, this is 3. Eventually, I understood how to keep score. Time on the clock, right? Do we play for half an hour, 45 minutes? In this case, the superintendent's contract is the time on the clock. The school year is the time on the clock. You have 180 days, at least you did last time I checked, of kids in school. That could be considered the time on the clock. How do we keep score in Georgia? How might we, using this analogy, how do we keep score? CCRPI. What else?
Graduation rates.
Graduation rates. What else is important?
Achievement gap.
Achievement gap closures, SAT scores, AP scores. The superintendent's evaluation should be tied to those things. Again, it's a cascading way of performance. Who are all the people that report to the superintendent? Raise your hand. Okay. So her evaluation essentially is a collection of each of your bodies of work. Does that make sense? And so as the orchestra director, she is managing, working with all of your work streams to make sure that we roll up and we get a good score, right? First on what the students need, and then whether or not it's tied to an evaluation. Okay. All right. You're the most new on the board. Why did you run? Why on earth did you run for school board?
No, I'm an education attorney and I, like you, believe education is everything and creating many opportunities in my life. And my dad's an immigrant. My mom barely graduated high school, and so I know that that's what has opened up so many doors for me. And so, yeah, I just think that it's everything, and I want to make sure. Yeah.
So you want to participate in that? How about you, Bill?
Why did I run for them?
Yeah. What's behind that?
Yeah, I mean, I had 4 kids in the system and did not agree with the direction of the previous system and wanted to engage. Stop talking about it on Facebook and actually engage to try to address it and throw it.
Yeah. So that's a very typical, both of those are very typical. Sometimes we'll have somebody who has kids in the school district that's super happy and wants to keep that. Sometimes it's not so happy, right? Sometimes I'd like to see that we're focused on all students as opposed to some, right? There's a variety of different reasons each of you run. Tracy, do you want to share with us why you ran?
I have a daughter in the district. I invested my entire adult life in public education. I moved to Decatur for the school district, and I think in probably the last 20 years, but maybe 15, it seemed like the classroom experience itself is often more elusive, harder to see and describe at the decision making.
And none of those are completely right or completely wrong. They're just your own personal lived experience.
I think 2 broad-based reasons. The first one is dedicated my life, both professionally and in public service to children, because my life's passion for children. This was a completely different way to serve children. I catch them often on the best day as opposed to last night, all of the first day. So this was for me personally, it was a different way to be of service. I think as a person, as a mom with 3 little Black girls in Decatur, not only the educational experience, but the social experience is very different. Color here, educational experience they get in the classroom. Like I said on the AI thing, a gifted Black girl is very different indicator, and I felt like that perspective was the value here. None of the work I do is for my own children. I feel like at the end of the day,
Yeah.
2 of them are fine. They're already gone. I think it's the other children that don't have the parent that can speak at public comment or have the time and energy to email us constantly. I'm able to provide something for them.
Yep, some advocacy, some additional support, right? The kinds of things that some folks just may not have. And so providing that's important to you, which I think is great. So all of you have come to this idea with some individual thoughts about what it means to be a board member. And every month that you're in the seat, there's clarity that comes with it. Sometimes you feel like there's not as much clarity as others. You're like, how does this work? Like, what are the rules of the game? It seems like I'm not so sure, right? That's why having time like this, not just in 3 or 4 hours, but some deeper, meaningful time together to really try to better understand how we move from being an individual, but understanding that we also have to move as a team. And sometimes it's easy to coalesce around a big idea, other times it becomes more complex. So you do not, here's the part that gets real fuzzy. You don't really have a lot of authority as an individual. Not on the board. Collectively, there are votes that need to be taken, right? And so we may have people in the community who come to you, Tracy, and say, you need to fix this. You ran for board, right? And yet, if you look at the rules of the game, you cannot direct the board, the superintendent, as an individual to take on a particular task or priority.
Can I ask a question about that though? Because I took a note there, because the way our norms are set up, it is one individual that can appeal to another and give an agenda item, or it is one individual that can appeal to two others.
You have to make a case, right?
So, I mean, I kind of take issue, like, I accept what you're saying, but then when you look at it in practice, at times I think individuals can have more power.
They can.
They don't have the individual authority.
That's right. Well, you're an English teacher. I'm not going to argue semantics with you because you've
It's an
won.
interesting norm practice that I don't know if this is all boards or just unique to our.
No. It's all boards
Yeah.
because you're right. But as an individual, you can't, but you could in a dialogue where we're at a retreat or whatever workshop, and you say, look, I want you to understand my perspective. You try to pull individuals towards you and say, I'd like to have a deeper conversation about that. I don't think really we're where we need to be there. And that's where the messy part comes in. But individually, in terms of authority for direction, that's not the case. So then the success of the board member is inextricably, tied to the success of the board. So you, as an individual member, are really tied. Oh, I should have waited. So you basically can't be a great board without the superintendents wanting you to be a great board. I've seen superintendents really get this wrong, where they're like, look, I'm just going to count to 3, or I'm going to count to 4, and I'm done, right? That's not good at all. The other is the superintendent cannot be successful without a great board. I've seen superintendents who I would argue are some of the best in the country, and they're working for a very dysfunctional board who argues about these little itty bitty things. And we're going to sit here and tear that sentence apart 50 times. And I'm watching these board meetings and I'm thinking, I haven't heard any of you talking about the things you said were important. Closing gaps, improving outcomes, making sure that our top performers feel that they have what it takes to get done while simultaneously focus on the bottom quartile or whatever it is that we say. And so we've got to be able to understand you're operating in a very complex system, right? And I guarantee you, you know more about this, even though you've only been on the board a little bit. Who's been on the board the longest?
It would be James.
So James and you. And so there are people in the community that come to you and have no idea about how this works. They'll see you and say, my kid just got a job and he needs a parking decal. Can you get him a parking decal? No. You know that, but the people in the community have no idea how this operates. It's a very complex system, right? That's not the role. I don't, get angry at Bank of America and go into the branch manager and demand to see the CEO and, I know that's a terrible example, but I'm trying to, share one that looks like that. So what winds up happening when I see the best boards, they don't always agree, but they unite across a couple of key things. And this is why sometimes it's dangerous when you have a board member who only runs on one topic. Let's say I have a child with autism and my kid's experience was awful. Therefore, I ran and I'm advocating for those families who don't have a chance to advocate. And all I ever do is talk about autism. Is that united in service for all children? No, I'm only worried about this one kid, right? You You can have, look, people have agendas. You're never going to get away with not having agendas. Can you pretend not to be a teacher?
No,
No, it's in your DNA. Can you pretend not to be a doctor? No, you can't. You said you're an attorney. You can't. It's hard to put that in like a box somewhere, right? But here's the thing. We don't need you to bring your teaching experience and medical. This is going to be a little bit like locking horns a little bit, right? We don't need you to bring your teacher experience. We've got how many teachers in the district? 400. I'm afraid to use this example with you because you're going to yell at me because you're a doctor. But I'm saying, like when COVID happened, could you contribute some interesting conversation?
Oh, but yes. Yes.
Yeah. And were you ever frustrated?
A lot.
Right. So have there ever been legal issues? How long have you been on the board?
4 or 5 months.
4 or 5 months. Have there been any legal issues that have come across your mind? It's hard to separate who you are from the work. Hans, I forgot what you do.
Mid-adventurer.
An inventor. Okay, now I don't have no example. You just caught me flat-footed, man. You caught me flat-footed.
Anything.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know what to say about that other than, you must be very creative, right?
Yes.
And you like to
He's
approach.
your chef. Maybe that's, he cooks.
I nobody pays me for that.
Yes,
Well, he has a passion on that, and
Yeah.
there's some new food and nutrition program that we're discussing. He may be inclined to do that. If he's an inventor, he's creative, and he may want us to do things slightly different. We may say that's really not what we need. What we need from you all is to figure out what's the most important thing for us. What is our vision, mission, and set of core beliefs and values? You hire the staff to operationalize that. Now, that doesn't mean that when you're in one-on-one with the superintendent, or you read something, or you've experienced something, that you can't speak on behalf of teachers, but you're not a teacher in this district. You're a teacher somewhere else. You're not a doctor in this district. You're a doctor somewhere else. You're not a lawyer. You're not an inventor in this district, right? You may live here, but we need to make sure we're always meeting and focusing on what's best for our kids. And sometimes we get adult issues woven into this. So you all have an interdependent relationship. Now, I would say this, and I have, whether Jima's sitting here or not, she's one of the best academics that I've met in my 30-year experience. And I can say that in truthful honesty. And she's made a big impact in all the districts she's ever worked in. Now, she can only continue to move the ball down the field appropriately if we can continue to operate well as a governance team. When we don't, staff are running around in circles, solving problems that have nothing to do with teaching and learning. And that's a real problem. I see it right now. I've been working with the Gwinnett County School Board for the last 18 to 24 months. There's some challenges, right? Boards have challenges, right? Leadership changes, new board members, new ideas, new concepts. But if we don't have stability, this group that's here can't get the work done, okay? So what we ask our board members to do is tell us, what does success look like? Remember earlier when I showed you how do we keep score? What does success look like? Sometimes we come down here and we're looking too close, so we need to move up here. Last time Mrs. Bernath was here, she talked to you about if you're at a dance, your experience at a dance would be very different than if you went up to the balcony and watched the people at the dance, right? Who was dancing, who wasn't, where were they standing, where are they not? But if you're down on the dance floor, you don't have the same perspective. And so you have to try to spend as much time as you can at the 30,000 foot level. Are the relationships based on trust, loyalty, and respect?
it should be.
Yeah, they should be, And one of the things I'm going to recommend here in about 15, 20 minutes when we get to a slide is, can we spend a little time going through that? I tell boards all the time, every time you add a new board member, the entire dynamic changes. It'd be like, I get divorced, I have a kid at home, I get remarried, and a new person moves into my home. Will that change the dynamics in my home? Absolutely, it changes the dynamics. So we need to be thinking about, can we find some time to think about our vision or mission or set of core beliefs and values and how we plan? Okay. All right. This is one that I've seen you personally grappling with, which I love. How can you deepen your linkage to the community? Okay, when I got to Fulton County, 2010, 2011, you all know the story, you live here. North Fulton, South Fulton. Everywhere I went, it was this huge divide between the haves and the have-nots. How am I going to link this school district to my community to better understand? I think I did a pretty decent job given every superintendent before me got fired between 12 and 18 months. And a few after me. Dr. Looney has done a nice job stabilizing the community. But in general, I think most of our success came from understanding and linking to our community. Not just the board members and not just the superintendent together. Okay? I'm doing the same thing right now in Gwinnett, trying to get them to connect with their communities to better understand it, because what winds up happening, whether we like it or not, is I'll hear from the same 2 or 3 people, and then I come and say, my community is angry about this. And the truth is it really angry about this? Or is it the 2 or 3 people that are in your influence are upset? Maybe they are, but maybe they're not. But the way to do that is to get out into the community and work together. Jima, talk to me a little bit about how you and your staff get into the community and then board members, I'd like to hear you guys talking about how do you keep your ear on the ground when it comes to community?
So the advisories are my number one. So I hold advisory meetings every 6 weeks, pretty much. Has to fall 6 weeks because of calendar. But I established a PTL advisory. That was one that was not here. I also established the Interfaith Council, one that was not here. I also have listening sessions that occur 3 times a year, not only in the evening, but also during the day, virtual, in the community, in all of the community. I heard very much early on that there is a section of our community or a sector of our community that feels isolated and marginalized. So I'm present there. Those are often, off the cuff, those are really where I'm present.
And did you guys know that? Did you know about those? Mm-hmm. So those are very powerful tools. This morning you were running out and I said, where are you going?
Yes. So
I went to this, I think you said you were going over to the high school.
I ran over to the high school.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I stay on the go a lot.
And so what winds up happening is the stronger our links to the community are, the better we understand and the more confident we are about taking a step forward, even into some things that might be a little controversial. How about board members? How are you thinking about our current state when it comes to board community connection and maybe some things we can either do better or do more of or less?
I mean, I run around and I talk to people. It's the same thing I did when I campaigned. So I understand that I might know people, I might have acquaintances, I might live in a neighborhood, I might run in a circle because of the virtue of my child activities. But I seek people out. I don't mind talking. You're at an intersection with a stroller and I'm asking you, do you use early childhood here? Before we had our community meetings, I took those business cards that I got and I wrote the community meeting times and I just ran around and walked around every area, like not so much Winona Park, but more like Oakhurst, downtown Decatur. I find talking to people one-on-one to be far more helpful. But then what I see is we have a lot of opportunities for people to share an email, put it in a form, speak in a microphone. I don't see how there's a link. It feels to me like we have 2 entities. You're the community and we are the school district and or
Who'd like that?
I agree. I mean, so I agree with Tracy. In person is 1,000 times better than almost any other format. I have more coffee than my body is probably meant to have. Just meeting with anybody that might be interested, whether they agree or not. I avoid social media like the plague. I think that is a skewed view. And
Keyboard courage.
Well, it just exaggerates the angriest, and I don't think that's a representative sample of the community at all. Certainly not my experience in actually speaking with folks.
I think, I think in-person meetings or even a phone call, sometimes
Yeah.
it's difficult to get people scheduled together to meet in person, so sometimes I offer to let people call me. But I usually give people, if they email me directly, if they call me by name, I'll give them 2 email responses and then tell them we need to talk.
Yeah.
Because going back and forth by email, I feel like contributes to misinformation, also a breakdown in kind of non-verbal cues. Sometimes you'll say something very matter of factly in sentence, and they'll think that you're being dismissive, but really that's not it at all. I also maximize on people knowing somebody somehow. So sometimes meet somebody, I'll run across somebody and really they'll pee my guts for something I said or some way I voted, and I'm like, yeah, I know that you know this person this way, and that diffuses.
It could de-escalate, couldn't it?
I met somebody the other day who actually knew my priest at church, but I don't go to church again. So I find that helps. Everybody knows somebody somehow.
Yeah. I mean, the world's, I hate to talk about COVID, but the world essentially changed for so many of us. And we're still living in this like hyper political, confusing and often like unpredictable world.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happens, they look to our leaders, like you all, to see how you're responding. Are we working together like with a sense of courage, but also optimism and a steady hand, as opposed to being explosive like you had mentioned online, right? It gets really complicated. How about you, Lorraine? Would you like to add anything to that?
I mean, I really appreciate it. I think Dr. Whitaker started us doing community meetings and giving us that opportunity where we can really interact and answer questions directly with the community. And like, this is 4 square miles. It is a very small community, and all of us have kids in the school district, so we have connections, and a lot of people, it's like a friend of a friend or everything like that. So yeah, but I agree, meeting people and talking face to face is always the best, especially when there are differences of opinion. But I think putting information out for people to understand is also important, for them to understand the facts.
Can I piggyback on something though? Because I think for the theme I keep hearing though is it's effectively because someone reached out. And so, could it kind of start with, I think, Kern, what you mentioned? I actively seek out people I don't know. That's the whole point, because otherwise, how many people are we talking about? We have 5,000 and change students in the school district, assuming, at least one parent or adult for a child. So that's like a lot of people. And so no matter how many people we know, I'm always as interested in all the other people.
Yeah.
Because largely, whether it's 650 people or 35 or 85, there's still more that aren't reaching out. They're not able to pay attention, and I am just as interested in knowing.
Yeah. And one of the benefits of that is who's speaking on our behalf when we're not in the room. Something really cool happened to me recently. I was in line. I'm not the superintendent anymore, but when people talk about schools, I always like turn my ear. And I heard these people in line at Publix, and the lady said, "Hey, I just moved in. I see your kid has a Jupiter High School shirt on. What do you think about that school?" We were thinking about going to Benjamin, which is a private school. And she's like, "Don't waste your money going to Benjamin. This is a great school." And I love that, because it's this moment where you realize that it's, she didn't have to say that, but she said that because her kid had a good experience and she felt connected and sure enough to say that. So who's speaking on our behalf when we're not looking, or we're not there? It's this linkage. But back to your point, Tracy, which is, where's the linkage part come in? Knowing is good, but a lot of these people want to do. Like, I want to contribute. And so as you think about your next strategic plan, how do you engage the community in a meaningful way, where it's not just when we get organized and ask East Blast That's the best. I've never seen school districts operate with good communication plans, like when we're gonna ask for money. We tend to be our best there, okay? So as we move along, I want to remind you again of our space, where we live as board members above the line, thinking about what results we want, what we want for our students and at what cost, Hans's point about the budget, and then where the superintendent lives. How you operationalize this body of work, a really good way to do that is what you have already. I love it. I used this example just the other day. I shared yours with Cherokee County Schools, with Mary Elizabeth Davis and her team, about let's memorialize some of the agreements that we have. Now, when you memorialize these, they're not always perfect, right? So I told you I've been married a long time. The rules that my wife and I set for each other when we first got married are very different as the relationship evolves, right? If you want to stay married, you learn how to compromise. Otherwise, it doesn't work very well, right? And so going back to these rules periodically is perfectly normal. In fact, I encourage people to do that, whether it's in a little environment like this, or we take our time in a more like off-site kind of retreat. So y'all had talked about 3 that had come up here recently. Dr.
Yes.
Whitaker, you want to
Yes.
chat a little bit about these 3?
Yes, so, well, during our pre-work session last week, yes, literally last week, we tackled 3. The document you have in front of you it's not updated as of yet. We're gonna codify everything from today and then from, last time, all at once. So what we discussed last time, we also said, let's go ahead and bring to today G, I, and P. So if we look, you have your notes in front of you.
You want to start with G and read that one out?
Yes. Yes, it is. So G is information request initiated by an individual board member as referenced in the information request of board member section will be provided to the board by the superintendent for full board consideration and majority approval. So that's how it reads right.
Is that working right now?
Board asks that we kind of talk through.
I think you have to go back to the section about information requests by board members to understand it better. Because
What part
then
are you referencing?
page 3D, and I guess that's for me as a person asking for things just so I understand what's going on. Sometimes I felt like it's been a bit bumpy when I've asked for some information and whether or not that's something that requires additional resources or not. And whether it requires, board chair to be involved and ask for a majority or not. Sometimes I felt like it wasn't a big request and being kind of not provided it and having to ask several times made me even more concerned. If I'm asking for, a 4 or 5 page contract that I didn't think was something out of the ordinary.
I think the question is, in that case, is not so much how much time does it involve to get it, as it is this an appropriate level of governance that we are beginning to engage in? And so I think that's where that difficulty was, and I think that's a good question for the entire board, right? Like, is it appropriate on one-off cases that we delve into clauses and contractual obligations in contracts that are either already approved or that fall clearly within the superintendent's
I
control?
agree that had to do with clauses or details. It's
But-
just, you know.
But
it
the
was
rest of
like
the board was
February.
concerned about it, and so I think that that's a reasonable
It
thing
was
for us.
the rest of the board.
I'm not raising this as an argument. I'm really raising this as a thing for us as a governing body to discuss, right? Like you want to discuss governance. That's exactly what we're discussing.
That's not in here. It doesn't say, is that within our scope or not? I mean, I feel.
This is
like
why we're having this conversation about.
I mean, I feel as, you know, we all have a fiduciary duty here as elected members to make sure that things are running well. And granted, that was a request I think I made initially in February. Brand new, I'm just trying to get my footing and understand how things operate and work. And, you know, I also try to ask with grace and say, yeah, I know I may be asking for some weird things, but I just kind of want to get the lay of the land and understand how things work.
Yeah.
And so me asking for something maybe out of the ordinary for most of it, and being ignored and not allowed to have it makes me actually more concerned and worried, like, what's the big deal?
Yeah. Well, there are, and our attorney can weigh in, there are things that are below the line. So for example, you know, an employee, there's a personnel matter, it's still under investigation. It could be a student issue with FERPA or HIPAA. And again, I don't know all of the ins and outs of what the request
Yeah,
was and
that's
wasn't,
true.
but there are times where someone will say, hey, I'd like that information. And from a management standpoint, you know, we don't think it's an appropriate space to go.
So I think that the concern over this particular situation was, and this was discussed at the last board retreat, that for board members in general to request to see certain contracts with specific vendors, if it's below the line, below the threshold, for
Yeah.
the superintendent, that it could give the appearance that board members are looking more carefully at certain vendor contracts or not others, and it could give the appearance of bias or against a certain vendor. And so it was not an issue of not trying to allow a board member to be able to review a contract. I mean, it's a contract, it's a public document.
Yeah, once it's approved, it's a public document.
That's how I felt and understood it. And I was even told at one point that I needed to go through open records.
Okay, so this is a point where we'll have to define some clarity to Hans's point about how do we do that. One last comment and then I'll turn it over, which is this notion of you've got a policy that allows the superintendent, and you've got to make sure that it allows them the authority to purchase items, et cetera, that are in some cases need to be done quickly. And in other cases, you have to go through an RFP process, which you had a policy for. Those are the protections, the guardrails that should allow us to manage that.
No, thank you. I think if we step back a couple 2,000 feet without getting too much into the weeds of contracts, I feel like we've had that conversation 5 to 10 times about over. What I see here, globally speaking, is that if board members want asking a question of the superintendent or her staff, regardless of what it is, and if it's time consuming, and we talked about that there's some subjectivity to that. I appreciate that. Then it sounds like the board, as a majority, has to decide that that's something that the board wants to pursue. And then what we're saying here is that then I go pursue it on your behalf. So if you direct it to the chair then goes to the superintendent to get those requests. That's, I think, what's maybe not happening from the perspective of the superintendent, the cabinet. They get a lot of requests for information, they get a lot of questions, and it's coming from individual board members, close to a extremely high level of communication. And then that's what G is saying, is that information requests by individual board members go to the chair, and then the chair, if it's approved by, as a majority approval, goes to the superintendent. So maybe that's, whether it's a contract, whether it's
Another body.
exactly, then if it requires time, if it requires anything, then the board decides that that's what the board wants, and then I say okay, and then I take it to the superintendent on your behalf, and that's kind of what's not happening.
I guess
here.
it sounds like.
That's what I think Tracy's gonna.
But I think the issue is the way I read it, two things. Information requests can be global information that I think I need, which is different from information for board meeting preparation. And so it's just written that way. G is specific to board meeting preparation, which is why I have harped on our waiting until Friday to produce the documents for a meeting, because I don't know what I don't know. So only when I see documents on a Friday do I learn I have further questions. Now, coming over to D though, as Lorraine was citing, for example, she gets on the board, and I know I had the same experience. D is just information in general. It's still
Page 3.
that Lorraine brought up, because they both have to do with information. First and foremost, I want to make sure I'm clear here. D sounds like I want information. I feel like I need information to do my job, get a lay of the land, get prepared for whatever's coming down the pipe. Whereas G is specific to the board meeting preparation. Am I correct there?
So 3D, so to help us with
Page
Yeah.
with
3.
the letters. Page 3, letter D.
I agree, this global information, and I think it needs more clarity, because right now I think it's a huge objective for us to fully or objectively implement, and I think it can create unnecessary confusion and perhaps even mistrust because of how it's written.
Yes,
But-
I would agree. And so a suggestion would be all information requests go to the chair and then come to me.
So moving forward
No,
then.
I'm just,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it is.
Yeah, I think this is the kind of
That's fine.
conversation
Yeah,
that needs to occur with a little more depth,
Mhm.
when we can sort of park some of those ideas. Now, you all bringing these up, I think staff, we can have a conversation later about what we might be able to bring as a straw man to get after some of these, because I think there's some legitimate issues of clarity that have been brought up.
It may also, just to help, I'm fine with it either way. I just want to say clearly, if it was the case that, board members were like, hey, I have a question, what other board members think, maybe I'm happy to advocate on their behalf,
Yeah.
I have to take it to, I think it might be also helpful for board members to hear kind of what your concerns are. Maybe the perception is that they ask a question and then staff or yourself don't want to give the information, but maybe what I hear, because I'm kind of in the middle of some of it, is that this is taking a lot of time, or you're asking for a quick turnaround, or what is the expectation here? So maybe it might be helpful for them to hear that maybe there's a little malalignment in perception with some of these tasks.
Right, because I just, now I can speak, when you look at, D, that requires additional resources to construct or develop. I'm just thinking, okay, I'm not gonna ask her for, to go and create something for me. So I'm reading that strictly as it is. Like, okay, this is just a 4 or 5 page contract, like, what's the big deal? And I've been told by you even, go ask for it, like, will you ask her? So it is hard. I think we need to define that
Yeah.
and understand it, because then Hans brings up another issue of like, well, you're asking for something that's too in the weeds, essentially.
Or it could go to
So-
what the attorney said, which is, why did you ask about Robert's contract but not about Samantha's?
Well, where I definitely agree with Lorraine on this, is that there does need to be a closing of loop on the conversation. If the request is going to be honored, or if there are concerns
Yes.
about honoring it,
The confusion.
we should just talk about that, right? Because I do think not responding to a request or being responsive to some board members but not others on requests does lead to a feeling that there is a mismatch. there.
And-
So,
One pro tip here is that, let's say a request did come to you, shared it with the superintendent. Staff says, look, this is a 10 or 15-minute request, not a problem. Let's share it back out. That whether you asked for it or someone else did, everybody gets both the question and the answer.
And I may also, to that.
Does that make sense?
But
Yeah.
to that point, it may be that then they don't no, not that it should make a difference who the question came from. All the questions would always come from me, you know what I mean? Not that it should make a difference in their speed, you know, then it would just be like the board has a question.
Yeah, that's what I'm.
The
Yeah.
question is
Yeah.
A, B, C,
That
D.
seems fair.
Can you get it back within
Yeah.
24 hours? And she can
Right, but we
say,
just have to
no.
be cautious of, and this is where self-policing has to happen, okay? I'm new, I get it, you're gonna have a bunch of questions, you're overwhelmed, you're trying to figure stuff out. At some point, though, you know, you begin to understand, those of you who've been on the board a year, 2 years, 3 years, as you begin understanding the rhythm of the school district, you have an advantage because you've been a teacher or principal, whatever. My point is, over time, we just have to be careful to self-police. It's very difficult for the board to say to someone, look, man, you've like submitted 33 requests. And, you know, my team is supposed to be out doing X, Y, and Z, and they're fulfilling these itty bitties that really, in the grand scheme of what our priorities are not aligned. Right? So I love this discussion. This is where, again, the sausage gets made. Nobody wants to do it. Everybody wants to eat it. But we have to figure out a way to spend a little more time getting after this nuance so that we can agree on how we're going to do it. Make sense? All right, let's move to the next letter if it's okay. Can we go to I?
On Facebook.
Yes. It says board member may request an item be placed on the agenda by submitting the request to the board chair. Prior to the deadline submitting agenda items, a board member interested in submitting an agenda item must have the support.
We amended this in the meeting, didn't
Yeah.
we? We did, it would be helpful to engage on this with the updated language, because we did just have a public conversation about this.
No,
It-
consent. Not
Because we
this.
added, we defined what the deadline was.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
we talked about it being Friday, or
Internal.
Tuesday, we get the information at the meeting. The materials are Friday, as well as the deadline for. So we did do all of that. I don't know that there's a lot for us. What were you hoping us to discuss?
It's just that it was brought up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think one thing, I want to point out is that, your policy is different in some regard from the board norm. The policy states that in order for a board member to add items to the agenda at the meeting, it requires a majority. The norms only require 2 people. So, you know, prior to the meeting.
Mhm.
But so that is somewhat inconsistent with each other. That you can do it one way at a meeting, but beforehand, you only have to have 2.
But isn't that because something may come up between the publishing of the agenda and the actual live meeting? Like, I'm just thinking in the last 2 years, it's been infrequent. And it's just anecdotal memory. So to that one, I understand, but I thought that was solely because something came up between the published agenda and the meeting date. Because I mean, no one would want to prevent in the event that there's something exigent, right? Like you can't just know because we published the agenda a week ago, so therefore we just can't talk about it live at the meeting.
Oh, no, I think.
Am I misunderstanding that?
You can still, you can publish. Or you mean post Friday, post publishing the agenda.
It's not about meeting break, it's not saying you can bring it up at the meeting and you need a majority. The question is, you know, why is it that the norms say only 2 members can bring it up, which means prior to the meeting, which means it's not even a majority decision to bring it up. But at the meeting, you would require a majority. So I'm just saying that.
That's a vote.
I think, yeah, at the meeting, you're amending
Right.
the agenda, whereas prior to the meeting, you're not amending
Yeah.
an agenda, you haven't created the
But
agenda.
along the lines, I think a lot of the language in the norms calls for majority. So this, I don't know if there's any other, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, if
Yeah.
there's any other line item here that says 1 person plus 1 other. I think the rest of the language.
Yeah,
calls
I've
for
had
majority.
difficulty with this in the past
Yeah.
too.
So maybe this should say a majority too.
There are times where it is valuable to protect minority interests as well.
And so I would rather us have harder conversations with things being added to the agenda that a majority might want to do. And I don't feel like this has really been abused. And so legally, I mean, I don't think I'm hearing that there's a legal problem with it. If you want to amend the agenda after it's published, you have to have a majority. If you are asking for an item to be added to the agenda and you have the support of at least one other board
For
member
the deadline.
before the deadline, right? Before the deadline, I think that is a reasonable thing to preserve.
Yeah, especially because our board is 5. So like
Yeah.
the minority here is 40% versus like a board of 9 or a board of 7. So
Cause but I
think it
think
should be
it's important to, cause I read rules and laws and I see what it says and I try to follow it. And so, it is frustrating when I see just the way it's written and it's not happening that way.
I don't understand what you're meaning.
Well, with my governance item, which I know we're working through and it's gonna be on the agenda, it was confusing to get mixed messages that, oh, Lorraine, it is on the agenda, it's in pre-work. But then it really wasn't addressing everything that I had requested and then saying, no, we can't do that. I had to ask once. And then that's when we elaborated and realized, okay, we need to have a separate time for everyone to see the agenda because that's set by the chair and the vice chair. Because then I don't know what I want to put on the agenda sometimes until I see it. So then that's when we realized that we needed to have a time when, it's submitted earlier, which is good. I'm glad that we did that. So that all of us get to see the agenda before it's publicly published. So then I think now it's like Wednesday or Thursday, right? Tuesday, and then we can add it before the Friday when it goes public.
Well, I think the first thing, Lorraine, is that I've addressed this agenda item at least 3 times, and it may not be what you want to hear, but with this particular topic, we just have to get a little bit of legal advice. And I think sometimes it's not fair to say that your request is denied when it doesn't come out exactly the way that you want it. That with this particular thing, there's some very sensitive legal issues, and I tend to.
It's not your choice to make that. That is our council advising, and we're going to follow our council.
So I simply had to take a little bit of time. Now, we could have rushed through it and done it wrong, but that was not the way to go.
Yeah.
So I think the other thing too is, with this here, we can add an agenda item, but we also have to be cognizant of the time and the work that it takes the staff to get it in there. So it's like I said, it's not always.
And also if it's for discussion versus action.
Right.
I feel like it's not always fair to say that your request was denied just because maybe it didn't come out in the exactly the time that you wanted. We are working with this particular thing. We're working on it. I followed all the steps that I said I would, both verbally and in writing, and that's
I hear
what
you.
we're
It
going
was
to
just
do.
confusing because you were saying, oh, it is on the pre-work, but I didn't see it on the pre-work.
You asked for 2 things. One went on pre-work, like I said, which was you asked for communication topics. That went on pre-work, like we said. This particular legal matter that you asked for, I said at least 3 or 4 times. I had to go back to GSBA to get some legal guidance. Now, I'm sorry that that's not what you wanted to hear, but that is what we were going to do. And then I told you just this morning, the legal team is helping me make sure that we do it properly because some of these are sensitive and confidential matters. And then once we get that straightened out, we'll proceed.
Yeah.
It is not
once, and then it just seems
It is
like I
not-
had one thing and then another.
I've said the same thing consistently.
So I think that the norm could include some languages around languages. Don't use me the word. Should include language around expectations of when, because it is unreasonable. Particularly, and I'm not saying that you did this, but if like something comes in last minute that's an enormous amount of work, it's just not going to make the next agenda.
Yeah.
It's just not going to make the next agenda.
Yeah.
And even if you've given sufficient time, there may be a significant amount of work that has to be clarified. And so I don't have an answer off the spot right now, but I do think we should put some parameters of time around that so that there is a reasonable expectation. Maybe it's within the next 3 board meetings or something like I can't think of anything that would take more than 3 months. to put
I
together.
think there needs to be some discussion or something added about the number, not necessarily putting a limit on the number of items, but keeping in mind that there's a reason why there's a BMOP with designated topics. There is a reason why the superintendent and the chair meet to decide what goes on the agenda, because there is a limited number of time amount of time at a meeting. And here's the reason that I say that the 2 board members versus a majority could be problematic is that you have all of these items to be added to an agenda, but there is not enough time at every meeting to have the discussion. So what process do y'all want to use for how do we prioritize these things and decide which agenda they go on? To your point, is it this agenda? Is it 3 months from now? But there's a realistic component to what can be handled.
I agree, and what worries me when there's pressure to move things through in a system, that we make a mistake and don't think about all the potential unintended consequences of either a discussion or a decision. So there's a reason that there are processes in place to slow us down, to ensure that from a legal standpoint, we're thinking about the right things, and that it's also aligned to all the other political landmines that we often need to think through before we make a decision. Discussion is one thing. I think the action is certainly another. But again, this is why I'm going to go back to this. We need some time to discuss these types of items. They're very difficult to just square up in a meeting when we've got lots of other agenda items. And BMOP is a very powerful way to allow you to do exactly what you should be doing, which is oversight.
Well, and then I think that's what I was, I think, going to say, which was instead of months, it has to be linked to policies and actions, which means maybe we need a more detailed policy calendar that aligns, because some of the, on the other hand, what I'm not comfortable with, totally respect the fact that you want to rush through this and create that. But what if there's an information gap? And so it needs to work both ways. And I think it's driven less by time and more specific, the goals, policies, budget decisions, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Some items are just naturally more complex than others. I don't know what P is. I didn't
Oh,
see
that's
that.
slide deck. I was just reading that. Draft preview of accompanying slide decks will be provided to board members the Friday prior.
This is something that I keep bringing up for a variety of reasons, mostly because we want that engaged public, right, community. And the agenda, the published agenda with all the documents is a link right now between, who I am as community member and what's happening here at the school district. And so when we're publishing it at 4 something on a Friday and no one is working over the weekend, it just
When's the
seems to
meeting?
have a
The
weird
Tuesday
cadence. It's a Tuesday, which is fine, but then we're told about time. And so, I go back to that information for a budget meeting to make sure that everyone, not just the staff, not just the board members and the community, all have the same respected amount of time to prepare.
I think with this one, we were trying to make sure that it aligned with how we had amended, one of the
I
other
will,
things.
so P is, I would say, standard operating process and timeline for school boards that meet on Tuesday in Georgia.
So have
So,
1-day meetings, not 2 different meetings over the course of a month.
I mean, APS has 1 meeting on Monday. Everything is published on Friday. Fulton has 2 meetings, but that meeting that is on Tuesday is published on the Friday before. Same thing would be for Marietta. That is a standard process in school systems.
And that's
Then-
perfectly fine. It's just that, again, we seem to really struggle with an understanding, and I use myself in this, in terms of information and time. And so I have brought it up repeatedly because people have looked at the agenda and then contacted me. And so, and then when I have reached out, sometimes it's like staff isn't working over the weekend, which I understand. So, I don't think it's a frequent thing, but I think we know the known knowns when there are items on the agenda that are either pretty meaty, cumbersome, or at times going to be, for lack of a better word, controversial. And I think there needs to be.
I think there's
respect for
some
that.
best practice that I'm happy to share with the
Yeah.
superintendent on socializing the larger discussion items
Yeah.
in some sort of workshop environment, okay? Let me share that with Dr. Whitaker separately, if you guys are okay with that.
Okay.
All right, so let's move forward. Again, as good teams, remember, how do we keep score? How much time is on the clock? Y'all took a look at yourself in the mirror first before we looked outside, and you did a self-assessment. You asked yourself, how are we doing, right? I don't know if you gave yourself all A pluses or some of you didn't, I don't know. But the reality is you've identified a couple of things that are places you'd like to get better, okay? We talked a little bit about that right now. We're talking about that today. Governance, right? The complexity of governance. How do we make something positive here in this democratic process that we have? What roles and responsibilities the superintendent has? We've spent some time talking through some of that. In just a moment, Amanda and I will talk to you a little bit about strategic planning. What is strategic planning? Why is it important? And then how do we get you all to weigh in simultaneously as we begin closing out the current one and thinking about the next one? And then this piece right here, which is board and community relations. This is a very important dynamic, and it's one of which, particularly in a district like this, where you have a lot of engaged parents, highly educated, people want to be involved, they want responses. And so how are we doing with these? And I am going to recommend that we spend some much needed time on those three. I don't think this is the environment to do that, but the governance leadership team develops a culture where input is sought, heard, and valued. But then also we've got to have the ability to say, okay, that decision's made. It didn't go the way I wanted to. I'm not going to just drag that along for the next 6 months, reminding everybody it didn't go my way, but I'm going to move forward and focus on the next big item, right? It's just how democracy works. B, the board develops policies to ensure effective communication. And then C, governance leadership teams ensure processes that develop, communicate, maintain procedures of communication. Essentially, this is also like your constituent services piece. How do we respond to the community? So what I'd like for you guys to do, again, I go back to this over and over again. How can we create a space where we understand how we're going to operate together, both formally and then also informally, with our agreement with the superintendent board communication? And I would argue it would be for us to spend, or y'all to spend some time together. And I'd like for you to consider, can you invest a couple of days where you're able to roll up your sleeves and really concentrate on the 4 or 5 most prominent areas that I think if we get them right, we could continue moving forward with this. So I don't know if you could
Yes,
take a look at
I
that.
would need to take the doodle poll.
I'll look at my count. I can't do it right now because I've got a lot.
So notice that Ken.
No, it's August 3rd.
August 3rd is first day of school.
No, I haven't.
Right, I think I don't want to find this.
I'm out of town.
But like, first day of school.
Yeah, they're all
Monday?
Fridays.
It starts on Monday?
Tuesday.
Oh, no, I'm about to write a letter.
Monday, I'm sorry, I'm wrong.
I was like, you have me down, I'm like, looking.
I'm good. It started before.
August 3rd is the first.
Our kid.
These are Friday,
These are all
Saturday.
Fridays.
Friday, Saturday,
Oh,
Okay.
but Friday, all day into or Friday. Friday.
I would say September. Make
No,
that
The days.
It's good.
September.
Completely different.
Here with the walls.
Oh, we have to do the doodle.
Why am I the only one that?
Oh.
Well, you,
I was
you're
gonna.
you're not gonna get it.
Your
if you
head,
doubt it.
yeah, your shadow.
There you
I'm gonna just
It's not coming up.
yell it out.
Tracy,
There you go.
a bit back.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I got it from here, thank you, even though I'm not those shoes. Where you tell me to be.
When is Labor Day break? Or when is
Labor
not,
Day is
not
the-
Labor
the
Day
first
break, I'm sorry, when is,
They were in the
not Labor Day, I'm sorry.
Fall break.
Fall break, that's what I'm,
Oh, that's.
fall break is the week of the 21st.
Yeah.
okay. So, yeah, I see.
It's a 2-day retreat or more?
Yes, it's good.
know if it works. Street sounds like we're. Where's that? Right.
So as you all know that Dr. Rosa has confirmed his availability for all those big services.
All right, so you.
Yeah, they're putting their times in. Melinda then tabulates her own and sends it back down to you.
All right, so,
And we're going to do it after this. next
okay, all right, so, BMOP, what is BMOP? And let me explain something. This process has been developed. There was an organization with AASA called the Large County Consortium that was really a group of the highest performing districts across the country. At the time, it was Fairfax, Montgomery County, Charlotte, Mecklenburg, and there were a few others that really studied deeply how is it that we can manage an opportunity for the school board in a very productive way to take a look at what's underneath the hood. And the way to do that is to identify which parts of the system tend to give us the most complexity, right? So if we do something on transportation, we don't need to do that every year. I think once we identify transportation, we could talk about it once, give some highlights on it unless there's issues. And then we say during the summer as we go to retreat, hey, we may need to talk about transportation again because it's reared its ugly head, right? And so when you map out the whole year, it does a couple of things. One, it ensures that we're following all the policies and procedures that are out there, that we're giving you all the information you need at the right time. That when you do get some sort of concern about special ed and you've got a few questions, they don't need to be answered right now. You know it's coming in September, for example. You make yourself a note and say, I'd like to bring these items up in September. So that board management oversight basically allows you to know when things are coming to you. And then truthfully, a great practice would be each summer, we sit down as a team at a retreat and say, what are some of the other things that are keeping us all up at night? And we map those and cross them through the whole process, okay? All right, so Amanda, you want to walk through a little bit about where we are with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So in your folders, and you of course have seen this before, but, or have seen BMOP before, this is the updated version for the draft, saw it last week as well, but for next year. So it's modeled after this current year, and with some changes for next year. You guys have presented this to the community before, so you're familiar with it. I always refer to it as our scope and sequence. It gives us those big bucket items that we're going to be talking about, aligned to both the strategic accelerators of the strategic plan to make sure that we're hitting each of the objectives are somewhere within one of those presentations to make sure that you're getting that look under the hood of the objectives of the strategic plan. As well as we've pulled out that student data focus, the budget calendar, and some policy calendar information for you as well, talking about the function of the board that we talked about a little bit earlier. One of the things that came up in your self-evaluation, one of the needs improvement standards that will continue to create that action throughout the year is acting as that policy-making body separate from that kind of operations standpoint. So your consensus statement was that you need to work on staying in the lane of governance. And so the BMOP helps provide kind of the map of when we're looking at that. So I want to draw your attention to a couple of additions or changes that were made from the 25-26 or our current year BMOP to this draft that you have in your hand now, highlighting a couple of things that kind of came into place to ensure that we're getting each of those objectives covered. So a couple of things that you're going to see in August and November, this came out of a lot of the school utilization conversations and things. We've put it in, I think we've actually moved it over to the budget side instead of the student data side, but student enrollment are getting those FTE updates to help us understand where our enrollment is from that FTE perspective. So that's added explicitly on in August and November. You will see the 5-year facilities plan added 3 times next year because we are coming up for to be working with the DOE on our next 5 years facilities plan. So that kind of is taking it through like the workshop process into the the whole thing, which is why you see it appear 3 times. Artificial intelligence, we all know, is a thing. So that's not something that was called out explicitly on the current year's BMOP. So that's in there. You'll see that in November. Staff engagement surveys are now May and contracts remain March. So just making it explicitly clear some of those human resources updates and things as well. Information on professional learning. The report is in June. Blue and Gold Institute, we know is kind of a new thing, so we want to make sure that you get the update on that. That's occurring in February. Student data adjustments to anticipated release. So you'll see some of the milestones might have moved around because we know that we're going to get our ELA results back much later this year because it's a new test. So because of that, you'll see some of the student data adjustments. And just so you're aware, the student data adjustment drives a lot of the mapping of the BMOP. When we get data and when we anticipate data is kind of starts them like, okay, so where is it appropriate then to give the information updates, say from teaching and learning, or to give that discipline information. So it kind of depends on the cycle of when we get the information or anticipate the information. Also in response, we have included legal services RFP in August. So that's there, and then annual contract renewals in both May and June. And then this year, because we've been working on the 2-year policy review that we really kind of worked out at the beginning of last year, you'll see those remaining policies mapped out in the policy map right now. And then also included in there is the fact that we're going to have to do some more mapping based on this most recent legislative session and what kind of requires policy changes. We did the same thing last year and where that will fall into place. So just high level for you, what's in your hand, again, looks similar to what we've been doing, but here are some of the things that we've heard and have changed or initiatives that are coming that either need to be more explicit or we wanted to call out and say, you'll see these on the BMOP for this year.
So I thought we were also giving suggestions. Someone asked me if this is the management oversight of the board. How do I read this other than these are topics? So like, I think, because I think that was brought up even in terms of information requests. So if we are calling this management oversight, is this document simply saying that we're making sure that in August there's an opening of schools? So I'm personally, I think we need more details in here, and it sounds like the objectives that we talked about, because I believe sometimes without those objectives is why we have information requests. Additionally, when I looked at the strategic accelerators, organizational effectiveness is pretty much every month. But when I look at building and sustaining and engaging in inclusive culture, I see nothing for August, September, October, or November.
So remember what this is for. That doesn't mean the work's not happening. It means when we talk about it, when we lift up the hood and show you what's happening, in some instances, there are things that have significantly more indicators than others, right? Were we going to talk about it just to talk about it, or are we going to talk about it because there's a result associated with something? Because part of your responsibility is to say, all right, let's say discipline was a major issue in the district. Well, we're not going to look at discipline every month. We might look at every 9 weeks because it's a major problem. We might look at it only once a semester or once a year because it's not a problem. So really what the staff is doing is laying out a map of when particular indicators might make most sense to share with folks. Otherwise, you're just gonna meet for the sake of meeting.
But I
But the other
do
part
want
of
to actually
the-
agree with Tracy.
Site here and objective part,
Yeah.
that if the staff is bringing it forward, great. But if the board is saying the objective, like, so for example, I personally, and I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but when we get, I don't think we should be getting an HR report only at the end. So I think we learned in March that the survey of the staff was from November. It seems reasonable to do a temperature check, right? For building and sustaining or retaining.
Y'all, this is your BMOP.
Yeah.
This,
Okay.
No, I mean.
That's why I was kind of concerned about this presentation, because I thought we were starting with what we were.
okay, so if we start with the blank piece of paper, we're gonna be here six
Yeah.
months, right?
The
And so,
general feedback though, and I wanna emphasize Tracy's point because I agree with it. The general feedback is, I think that this board feels, I'm speaking for everybody, but please jump in, that this board feels there are important topics around is sustaining, engaging, inclusive culture and cultivating, retraining quality professionals that warrants more conversation than twice a year, or in one of the cases, just once a year. And if that means we trade it off by having a couple less conversations around organizational effectiveness, I think there's a willingness to do that, right? There is what we focus on in the meetings is what we value.
Yeah.
And this BMOP would read to me as, we don't have an issue with retaining or cultivating quality professionals, and we don't have any issue with building and sustaining an inclusive culture, but we have massive issues around organizational effectiveness and excellence. And I don't know that that's accurate. I think that reads, that's not accurate. I think that there is a balance.
so are you saying then that there is a problem with the one you want to talk about more?
No, I don't. I think
Because
it's
I
wrong to say that there's a problem.
Yeah.
I think there are legitimate questions around teacher retention, teacher pay,
Morale.
I know,
morale.
talking about that every month does what?
No, no.
Not every month.
month.
Not every month.
You're
Don't-
talking about looking
don't
under the-
exaggerate, but-
You asked me when I got on the board, and so if all we're, I'm not saying that's the
Yeah.
case, but if what we're hearing is this, what we're seeing is this presentation in May or March, and like I said, I learned during that presentation that that survey was from November.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't the school district want to? Why wouldn't the board?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't the
Look,
administration want to
you-
say this is where we are?
You all have to decide that. My question is this, you have to remember, this is your meeting.
Yep.
In public. This is not a public meeting. You talking about it, it may signal something to people that it's important. But I guess my point was, and Hans, I'm not saying it has to be every month.
Yep.
But my point is that there are naturally some times during the school year that there is something for us to bring to you to do oversight. Right? I mean, I guess we could do an HR report, doesn't have to be a BMOP. There are plenty of reports I gave my board that were
Let me say
every
it this
month
way, maybe.
on attrition or,
Mhm.
you know,
Right.
cash flow or whatever.
Let me say it this way, right? There is, generally what we get in a state of HR report is a results presentation.
Yeah.
Like, this is where we are
Summative.
with the data set, this is what's happened over the. I think that there is an appetite for us to have maybe just one. It doesn't have to be 20 meetings over the course of the year, but one that says, we clearly recognize these three topics are a thing that we need to be focused on. And here are the things we're gonna do over the next 6 months or next 12 months to address each of those things. And at the end of the year, we're gonna read out to you what the results of those
Yeah.
three things are.
I mean,
I
I'll be
think
honest,
there's some value to that.
I think there is too.
And maybe that's here, but to Tracy's point, it's not like me reading it, I can't see that pop off the page,
I think
right?
maybe what I'm hearing though is like Lonita reports, does a financial report every single month, but now that's required by law. But, you know, but she does report out every single month. Maybe what I'm hearing is that the state of HR is like the big, woo-hoo, but maybe if what we're saying is to the point here that, you know, going into this next school year, you know, teacher pay, retention, morale, all those things have now risen up high on the radar where we feel like we need to be reported to more than once a year, then it doesn't necessarily have to be in here. We could just say,
You
we
can
could
put
just
a
say we
report.
want to report.
You can have a report once a quarter on, these are the
Exactly.
number of teachers we've hired, these are the number of teachers, because you should get a personnel report anyway. Maybe we can add something that's
Let me
cumulative.
maybe say it this way. I think what we have done in the last year and a half or 2 years has been excellent in terms of shifting the narrative around how the students play. And we've seen the results. We've absolutely seen the results. The cost of making those changes is that it has complicated how teachers feel about teaching in the district, because we are wholesale shifting the culture of instruction indicator for good reason, because the way that we were doing it before, this is not a teacher fault thing, this is us, but the way that we were doing it before was clearly underserving some kids. So now we've made the changes to serve the kids. It's tough on teachers. So what are we now doing to lessen that burden on teachers without losing ground on the benefits and the improvements we've made for kids? And however we reflect that, I don't think it's a readout on data within a month. I think that there is a conversation that is an acknowledgement of those challenges and a plan on how to address them.
Yeah, so building, you can go. Yeah. 'Cause you're-
Well, I feel strongly that it needs to be written in here because we can't have it both ways. We told people at the community meeting, we want your input. And it is called management oversight. And so to your point about looking under the hood, what else do we even publish for the public? So you get to come to a board meeting. You get to provide public comment, you get to email us suggestions. So I absolutely think it needs to be in here. And I'm not sure I agree with everything you said there, Hans. However, to the point that our largest employee base, and we tell people it's our largest budget item, is salaries. And we do know, I think factually, that you probably end up spending more money when you are having to replace people. And I don't know why we wouldn't want to publicly share the good stuff as well. This isn't just all like data. I absolutely think it needs to be more than once a month. I don't know why we wouldn't highlight that.
You could make it look just like I said, like the budget. See how it says budget calendar? You could make it say like HR report. Like you could have it the same frequency.
So what I would suggest, you have state of HR in August. You can put, when are we doing upbeat? Okay, so one of the things that you see here on the BMA, it is when the results are available. So when the student results are available, that is when we provide the information. So if you have state of HR in August, after the upbeat is administered, you can read out what it says. Now it's informative, but you can, and depending upon when the window closes, it would be either in November, probably not November, if it's administered in November, but add it in December. Add that information, and then when it closes again, you have the information again. And in the interim, or during that time, you say in the state of HR, these are the things we're going to focus on this year. That's part of the state of HR. And then you're providing the data that says, is that working or is it not working? And
But also it's a victory lap for what Tracy was saying, which is let's brag about, if there are things you're doing differently, let's brag about it.
Yeah.
And then also admit that, hey, there's some spaces we still need to get
I
out.
think the other things though, like we have a lot of advisory councils, we have FLTs, and so whether that goes into the cultivating and retaining quality professionals or the engaging inclusive culture, which is supposed to be student outcome driven, and the SLTs are looking at school improvement, I think we need those readouts too. So I certainly am not going below and saying how it needs to be done, but I think a human quality to the presentation that would allow for us to find out, like, so I know there's an SLT and I know there's a teacher advisory council, I know there's a PTO advisory council, and I know there's an SCLT. But right now, as a board member, unless I go and I look at the minutes, I have.
That
and-
seems really, I mean, I hate
Well,
to
but to
dis-
the inclusive
disagree.
culture and then to our self-assessment about the community, then
but
what
you're
is the
handing that
mechanism?
management to your school building.
But how do we know, I think back to, like, we identified community relations there. Our strategic accelerator is building an engaging and inclusive culture. So how is that then measured? How is that measured? It is one of the 4 accelerators. Student success in all areas, you can see an improvement by X percentage for all students, in addition to closing the achievement gap. You can see star literacy scores, but then what is the building and sustaining and engaging
So maybe,
culture?
maybe what I hear, Dr. Rose was saying is that this is not supposed to turn into an agenda calendar, as if we get like too germane into, this particular action item, it won't be a management oversight plan, it'll be like an agenda calendar.
But then, okay, so then I guess the question is, what does the board come up with? Because to what you were saying about under the hood, if culture is the one thing people see, and it based on what they feel, and we're not presenting anything else,
Strategic.
there's gotta be a linkage, to use your term there, which is why I immediately thought of things like
Well,
that.
I think this is a topic worth investing, time in during a retreat where we can roll up our sleeves and say, let's look at the whole year in totality. When you start talking about minutes at like a school governance team meeting, I, as a former superintendent, board coach, say, look, I think you're getting way too far in the weeds. You're on the dance floor right now. And I need you to come up to the balcony so you can get a sense of what's happening. If you want to go down that rabbit hole as an individual and you want to look at those things and read them, I think that's important. That's really a staff issue. That's just.
So is the
that's how I
charter then with the SLTs and the SCLT not a board responsibility? The board has nothing to do with the charter. We hand that over and that's not part of our oversight.
Sitting at a 40,000-foot level, I look at this and we have 9 meetings before we have a topic about building and sustaining an inclusive. So at the 40,000
Yeah,
foot level,
I hear you.
that's a giant chunk of time that we're not talking about one of the core pillars.
That doesn't mean it's not happening, but we're not talking about it, which is signaling, is it a priority or not?
Well, and while it may be happening.
Yeah.
We have no oversight of it. And this is an oversight plan.
Yeah.
We should have
I don't-
oversight of it,
Hans,
right?
I don't disagree with you.
So Tracy and I are like 50% overlined on this. I think she's going into a little more detail than I would, but I think where we both
Just
are,
looking at what existed.
yeah, where we're both overlapped is that 9 full meetings of this body in the year before we talk about one of our 4 pillars is too long. We should have a conversation.
So what I would suggest is your student data focus, school climate survey data. It's under student data focus, but you do realize there's building and sustaining and engaging inclusive data.
That's also gonna be my question,
Like-
some of these things overlap, do they have some
Yes,
cross?
so what we can do. So I'm gonna go back to Great on Their Behalf. Great on Their Behalf says you start with the student data and plot that first, for when it's available. So if it's available here, this is when we're going to discuss it. That's why it's listed there, but it's truly building and sustaining and engaging inclusive culture, and your KPI is that.
Well, then, I mean,
So move it over.
if we're gonna have a conversation about student sentiment that is rolled up into another presentation, maybe that should be its own conversation, right?
Yeah, we can.
Or, I mean, because I also think building and sustaining and engaging inclusive culture is more than just student perspective. I do think that it has to do with utilizing our SLTs, SCLTs. I think it is about some of that. And so I guess what I'm saying is what we put on this paper is this in and of itself is a communication device.
Mhm.
And so we should think of it as such.
Yeah.
And if we aren't communicating that is a priority, then that is a problem.
And this is gonna be forward facing, right?
It
Yes.
is, but on the website.
So what I meant was it's draft and ultimately it will be published. So, I think maybe to Hans's point, it will be kind of eye-catching to the public that it's so like shifted to the left. So whatever, I think adjustments, if there is some overlap of some of these things kind of cross-pollinate, you can make that adjustment. Also, it probably would be helpful for the public for it to be like a live link so they can click on 5 years facility plan and then see a descriptor. Otherwise, they may not know.
The state of
You know,
R is not a reactive, it's
Yeah.
proactive, like that would be.
Yeah,
helpful.
we know what it means, but just a little too line.
Well, and I think that's the other, so we have the 24-25 and the 25-26 currently published at last. So, and I look at this one, and it looks similar.
Yeah.
But I think if someone said to me, how the heck do I know what opening a school is? Like, so just in terms of public facing again, and maybe this is partly your point about the link, I just don't think it tells anyone enough. And I think of last August, when we had that public comments survey, and the general theme I remember from the comments was less about what time public comment starts, but how I know what's going on, right? So we direct people here because this is really where you could see, and we've told people, the community being like, hey, you know, we have these things scheduled for certain months, but to be honest, to most people, how would they decipher this? If this is meant to be public facing?
I
don't
do
get-
like the idea of a hyperlink.
I
right?
hear you.
I can click it and it
Yeah,
gives me.
and it gives a short description, what is opening school mean? It's basically just showing how it went, right? But I hear you. Do you give the board periodically any like update on any initiatives or like a strat planning? So another way to think about this document, if we're really looking at it the way Hans is talking about, it's not only showing people what we do as a board, but also shows like how we're spending our time, and therefore there's a value associated with our time. Could we layer in any other like quarterly strategic plan updates on X, Y, and Z so that the people see the whole picture begins to emerge of BMOP? Because BMOP and strat plan oversight or any of those pieces really are the same thing.
Which is the executive summary documents.
Yeah.
That's what.
All right,
they
so
receive.
for the sake of time, might you guys be okay with y'all giving me an opportunity to meet with staff a little bit about another way to position this, taking into account everyone's discussion about the visual of presenting what our priorities are and looking at these pieces around culture more frequently, and then maybe bringing that back when we're together in the
Whatever date we
yeah,
set.
the workshop.
One other thing to add to your original like list of conditions there under AI, and it's also testing. I know I'm very interested. That's the problem about Chromebook usage. Way to weave that into our site. It's I know definitely some literature out there about how are you bringing to appropriately behind it, but I know, you know,
It's a national piece, like there's several districts who've taken like devices out of like K5. They're thinking about how that it is a national.
Policy, right?
I mean, that's what I'm saying. I don't know if maybe a better way to encompass both of those things together and call AI might be some other like link put together, perhaps.
I appreciate the sentiment. I just worry that they're sufficiently different, and AI especially is so the weeds of AI are just so much that they probably should be separate. I do think that those are separate in that clearly taking screens out of the classroom is going to inhibit to some extent the use of AI, but we want to. I think those are separate conversations.
You know, I'll plug the idea too. So it's not only the tech side, but it's also other side of the table, instruction. And so
Yeah.
I think we have met, I think, with some of the same constituents you have. And with, and there are several groups, but where Ms. Burton and I have left things with many of those parent groups was we have heard many of the requests. We shared with the board last month, many of the things that on both sides of the aisle we're working on implementing. And I think we reached a point where we had asked, we got the grace to say, let us now implement some of these adjustments for going into the next school year.
Okay.
With the notion that at mid-year, which is when the technology team is already scheduled to do a state of, so maybe that might be a time to make sure we follow up at
In
that
November?
point.
Not to,
First semester.
like, I do want to just put this out there. While I appreciate the technical understanding of AI and Chromebooks rests with IT, and it's a tech review. The true important element of it is the impact on instructors and the impact of the classroom. So I actually think the conversation about Chromebooks in the classroom or not, and the conversation of AI in the classroom or not, should come from Dr. Burke, not from
Well,
IT, right?
I think it's both. I agree. I think some of
We
it.
have to look at a policy.
Yeah.
Because otherwise,
Well,
it's just a lot of different people chiming in. Isn't the policy what drives? the
I
action?
agree with that. I think that the mechanism is whatever policy we decide is driven from the perspective of how it impacts children in the classroom, which then impacts the technical side. But it should not go the other way.
I also don't think just, and this is my understanding from, and you're the teacher, but also the medical literature, I don't get the feeling that the driver here is to eliminate screens, not in the year 2026. It ain't gonna happen. I think some of it is just the responsible use thereof, and then how screens are affecting developing brain learning, et cetera. So I think it is a little bit of both, but I do agree with Tracy, maybe some of the first step is to look at how what our role is. We're not here to police how teachers use screens per se, but maybe the first step is policy. I was just bringing it up. I know that it is out there. I think it would be foolish of us to not have it. I think that would be the wrong way to go to not have it.
Yeah. But
Whatever.
AI is there, I'm sorry, but the Chromebook.
Yeah, but whatever time period Eston and Jennifer feel like is the best place, I'm really open to. I just think it should be.
I mean, shouldn't we though, I mean, it sounds like a larger conversation because I'm just thinking in terms of school years. So like if we're talking about a policy, we'd have to be looking at it ASAP in order to even get it to an arena in which it wouldn't be interfering mid-school year. I don't even know if that's too late when you look at first read, second read.
In September, you're starting with policy.
We're really going to review policy.
And you can add in.
So is it November when we're getting all of the recommendations from I'm sorry? Yes, I was about to say Mia. No, but from Zoe, we're getting those recommendations in November. I would want those recommendations to influence policy.
But I think to your earlier question, and I don't know if this is above or below the line, like, and then I think what you were saying about the Chromebook, I'm assuming there's a budgetary item that someone could chime in, because books versus Chromebooks and paper versus Chromebooks, and so I think there are associated impacts that not in that decision-making realm, but I think there's a lot that has to be considered, but I would argue sooner rather than later, personally.
All right, rich discussion.
Rich discussion. In the interest of time, the community feedback was shared with each of you. There were 5 community members or parents who provided feedback with some suggestions. We did have a little activity planned. I'm going to skip it. Basically, a lot of the feedback that came through, there was some about like, revisit teacher salaries was one. There was one on, I want to understand the status of the ECLC project. There was one about pre-K and elementary schools. There's one on spend time explaining financial strengths. And part of it is, we were going to do an activity, is that governance or operations? And then where's it is it already in the BMOP? And much of it, really all of it, is somewhere in the BMOP, right? So it already existed in many ways, and it might be getting to the point that you said, what's the description, so we understand what that really means without having to look back historically for what it was. But there was a lot in there. And I think we kind of got to this too, and then we kind of said, okay, continue on. Was inviting some warm and cool feedback. Where do we have some specific suggestions of what needs to be changed? And where were we, kind of satisfied with the way things were as well.
So what happens since, we started with the self-assessment, and I think there were 3 areas, one of which is community. So for the 5 people, assuming it was 5 different individuals who did provide this feedback.
Yeah.
Do they get a thank you for sharing, or?
That was provided anonymously,
Okay.
and we are honoring it by, you guys have looked at it, it's been shared with you. With a little more time, we would have discussed it a little bit more in depth, but I think the overall theme is thank you for your feedback, right? And we spend time looking and reading and listening and considering it, right? Just because you provided feedback doesn't necessarily mean like, yes, we're going to do that, but it does mean that we've heard it and we're considering it.
So I don't know if this is the time to ask this, but again, I'm keeping there specific to what we've talked about regarding community. And I would like to see something that is less of a blank, here's your paragraph to write what you want, right? Because sometimes people don't know enough to write it detailed. So I know I brought this up for budget feedback, but I imagine something similar could exist in other arenas, so that you're going to get like off-topic comments sometimes, because it's like, this is the only place I can provide it, so I'm gonna say something. You're gonna get stuff that's probably not going to be as specifically actionably helpful, simply because there isn't enough action item information for people at times to inform. So I don't know if it's specific to the BMOP, to the budget, but I think we could do a better job with what we're giving people to give us input, so that input might be, if not better used, better categorized. Like, so for the budget, I was saying, like, I was looking at DeKalb's this time, and it's kind of like, hey, this is one of our initiatives, check off which you approve of, right? So there's the freedom to provide input, but
I think, like all things, you can take classes on social
Sure.
design. I have, so there's a lot of things to be considered. I think with this one, one of the asks of the board was, ask people, how do they give input to BMOP? It was designed in such a way, do you want to add something? Do you want to revise something? What's your general topic? So I think it varies a little bit, but noted.
Sure.
All right. I would ask that, Ferd, we'll see where we can take this for now, because I don't want to, in case our vote was September, I don't want to go into the new school year without a map here, right? And this is what that is, right? This is our map and our plan. So we're going to continue to kind of massage it a little bit, and communicate out to you guys, so that at least we have, we can't go in blind, right? So the structure that we have now is going to at least have to guide us as we can continue to kind of refine there.
Yeah. All right, so just to sort of give a 30,000-foot view of a strategic plan, why it's important for governmental agencies, large corporations, and others to think about a long-term strategy. A lot of what we wind up doing and seeing is in the short term. It's what's happening in the classroom today, how a teacher feels today. We need to move up to the governance structure and say, these systems don't move very fast, right? Because it's dependent on people. And so when there's people, there's variation, and we have to create some narrowing of that variation by creating a few priorities. And that's what will happen as the strat plan begins to wind down. The level of engagement needs to rise. And I think we have good timing with this communication discussion that we hope to have, where we begin thinking about not only looking at data points, which is important, that's the quantitative, but also qualitative, which is why it's important you all have these community meetings. The superintendent goes out, continues to listen and learn, walk classrooms, et cetera. Themes begin to emerge. After the themes emerge, that's sort of what is the priority. How you get there will be the staff's responsibility. Those are the initiatives that they create. And then you get to decide, are we going to fund them or not? That's how the budget works, okay? So that's that. Now we're kind of coming to, when is the
28. So we called ourselves at the top of the mountain right now. This year was the peak of the 5 years.
Yeah, and then we continue to operate. It doesn't mean we're coming down on academic outcomes. It just means that the new initiatives have all rolled out, and now really it's a matter of sustaining, supporting, and to your point, keeping the people happy, engaged, because they're doing hard work and they're getting good results, but they need to understand, we need to understand that we appreciate that.
Yeah, so we're gonna take a little bit of time to talk about the strategic plan now that we're almost at the last day of school, you know, a little bit longer to the end of the current fiscal year. But one of the areas of improvement that we talked about was providing input to and adopting the system's strategic plan, but knowing that it's a 5-year plan and it was adopted and moving in those directions. So one of the things that we do at retreats, we were here last year for those of you who were on the board, and we got our strategic plan updates at that point as well. So I just want to talk a little bit about where we are in this journey and then talk to you about what we have done this year specifically. So we know that we have the All Indicator Strategic Plan. That is our 5-year plan. It is guiding our work. It is those big things that were set, and that is the initiatives that we're leading and working through. We just talked about BMOP, right, as a transparency and accountability tool. It makes sure that we're giving you presentations on each of those objectives embedded somehow aligned to the strategic plan so that you get that look under the hood, right? So that's the plan that ties to the strategic plan. So you know we're doing the objectives that we talked about doing. We've also talked before about our balanced scorecard. Those are our key performance indicators, our KPIs. In November, I stood before you over at the conference center, and we dug a little bit into our KPIs because we know that they're lagging indicators. So it takes a little bit of time for those to catch up with us, but also on Simply Visible lets us know how we're doing. And then we have the executive summaries. So these are the high level plans for each objective of what it is that we're trying to do. And we sped date last year. Board member Earrier, you weren't here, but we looked at all of the 16 strategic plan objectives, and we got, as cabinet members, each of us time with board members to give feedback into some of the major milestones, into what it looks like, and to kind of give updates and have a two-way dialogue around that. So today you'll notice we're in a different setup than normal, and that's so that cabinet can be part of the conversation as well. Around some of the advances that we've made on the strategic plan this year specifically. So these are some of the things. And as I said before, the strategic plan is a 5-year strategic plan. We're in it right now, right? So what we don't want to do is completely turn around and do a 360 on something. We want to continue and stay the course. And as I said, and board member Anderson, thank you for your smile earlier when I said we're at the top of the mountain, right? Like we're halfway through it. It doesn't mean, you know, we're going low on, it just means we're now made a lot of progress on these, but we've got until the 28th to really see through this strategic plan that we're currently with. All right. So in your packets, just so you know, are copies of the executive summaries, and I'm going to give you some highlighted information. So we know our 4 strategic accelerators. We know our first strategic accelerator is student success in all areas. And here on the screen, you'll see across each of the 4 objectives that live inside that particular strategic accelerator, right? So delivering high quality standards-based instruction, the meaningful assessments, college and career readiness, and closing achievement gaps, right? So in BMOP, we saw some of these as student data pieces, right? And when we hear state of teaching and learning, we know we're going to get information on how they're delivering high quality based assessments or instruction, and maybe some on that assessments. Both of those kind of go together nice. So they might live in one presentation, which is why you might see some presentations and some columns have more or less, because part of it has to do with how these different objectives can even be addressed through different presentations. All right. In November, I took you in Simply into the KPIs and told you how we were doing on each of our KPIs. There were 2 at that point that we didn't have data back on yet. We've got 1 now. Another's still super lagging. I'll get there in a minute. But this gives you a sense, and it's all tagged in Simply, but we went over this particularly in November for the KPIs for each of these objectives. So in 1, high quality standards-based instruction, this one is our big one. It's got like 16 objectives because it breaks it down into the percent of students in ELA and the percent of students in math and the percent of students in 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, so on and so forth. So that's why there are so many there. But overall health was good, right? Like we were making progress, meeting or exceeding them in most places. And notice that, for KPIs, red could also mean no change. So it could actually, which is a little, I should probably change that, right? But it means no change, is the like language that was built into the system as well. All right. So in 25-26, when we speed dating something, we had laid out some major milestones for the 25-26 school year. This is high level, the major ones that were on there, that would be focused on this year. So in this first objective, which is called like 1A on your sheets, it was ensure the curriculum consists of a clear scope and sequence aligned to district, state, and national expectations, create district and school level assessment calendars, So the green here tells me that the owner of that objective, check, completed. We did some of those major milestones. Now, there's a lot of little pieces, not below the line, that goes into the objectives. But these are the major objectives that were identified that needed to be done as we work towards 2028 or wherever we are in the design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluating things.
Is it meant to be able to link this to that? So you're saying 6 of 8 there, but I'm seeing 7 on this.
Okay,
page.
so this is major milestone. So it's that next, so that's the column. This is the KPIs. So if you'll see different information, we went over KPIs in November. That's this look
Oh, that's
that tells me
okay.
in 25-26, which of our KPIs did we meet?
Okay.
All right?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Are we intended to be giving feedback on this?
So last year we did the speed dating. Right now, I'm going to give you an update on each of these, but if there's a piece of an objective or something that we need to like know or think about to meet the objective, then we can have that conversation.
So largely the superintendent sets these KPIs for the individual.
So the KPIs were established.
I mean, when you pulled out each individual, like.
But like, I think I'm going back to what our meeting started with, which was effectively the board's objectives, right? Because we don't get to tell the superintendent what to do, right?
Right.
We simply are expected to set objectives so that the superintendent can meet this. Is that correct?
So strategic plan
Right.
objectives.
Yeah. So the reason I'm bringing this up is objective number 1B overview, provide meaningful and relevant assessments, plural, has one KPI, which is the STAR test. And so I'm just, do we get to give feedback on this, or are we simply the recipients of the information?
It says here that there's 6 KPIs.
Yeah, there may
And
be.
then
I'm
there's-
definitely looking right
Yeah,
here. Key goals.
I'm
and-
agreeing. I'm seeing only 1 here and 6 there. I'm just a tiny bit confused.
It's because some of them, as like an assessment, you're trying to look at it from different grade levels or different subjects. So it may be said, it's one assessment, one goal, but there are lots of different,
Like in this one,
grade levels.
star is the KPI, but there are 6 different ways we look at star.
Yeah.
Like what they're saying?
It's a grade level.
By grade level.
K1.
Okay.
But number 4 specifically talks about other assessments. So I understand that KPI mentions STAR, but then number 4 mentions other assessments like the interim.
Yes, so walk with me here.
That's another-
These are our KPIs.
Uh-huh.
And there's multiple because we broke it up by grade level on the KPIs for STAR. All right. Now, the objective is meaningful and relevant assessments. Remember, KPIs are our lagging overall indicators that we look at. But like any teacher, we've got our formatives all the way on. And staff is using formatives as we go along too, to measure how we're doing so that at the end, our overall KPIs report outable. They're giving us indicators on how we're gonna do to meet that summative, right?
So why, and I'm just curious,
Yeah.
why wouldn't we get that readout? So for example, by the end of the year or somewhere mid-year, it's like, hey, look, those 3rd graders that had this STAR test result in August now are up here.
You get that readout.
Oh, we get the formative readout?
No, you get the STAR readout.
That's what I'm saying though. So we just get the STAR readout y'all don't want the check-ins, like, hey, before we get to STAR over here, so if you're doing STAR in December, what happened in October and November?
So,
That was the,
go ahead.
so with the assessment plan, this is the first year. So what was shared was that we would design
Mhm.
and implement, but we're not going live on results of interims. Now, if we want to add results on those types of assessments later, that's when it goes back to the previous conversation on BMOP, and that becomes more student data we're presenting.
So what we're saying is, we didn't have the ability to track the performance on those interims. That has now been put in place. I probably agree with Board Member Anderson that that needs to get eventually into a metric that we track as well. I don't know the right way to do that, but I think that that's a reasonable expectation now that it's in place.
Yeah, so the details of like the milestones, those are set and tracked by.
I mean, milestone is state, STAR
No,
is with the district.
No, I don't mean that. I mean here where it says major milestones. So that, yeah, that can be confusing. So and that,
Jordan, not Jordan.
so that's
Yeah.
Project milestones.
because when you're saying that it's completed, is that something that like each individual chief put in place in the
So each
superintendent? says it's
individual chief,
completed?
yeah, so each individual chief identified major milestones that they need towards their objective, and you'll see some of them go out to 2028,
Yeah.
right, on
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
This is what we did our speed dating on last year, and we gave some, and some got added and changed and refined. There are major things that we need to advance the work. So now that we're at the end of this year, and as we go along, we're looking and we're saying, hey, this was something major, Jennifer Burton, Karen Newton Scott, you said that you needed to do to advance the work. Ding, ding, they're telling me now that they did it. This is my report out, this is our report out to you on where we are on our strategic plan and what we said we were gonna do to hit each of these things. Now, is there extra data points in here? Yeah. In the BMOP, sometimes they come out through her STAR presentation and here's where we are. But the overall data point is our KPI, which is our lagging at the end, like kind of our how we're doing at the end looking. But there's indicators along the way, and this ties directly into BMOP when we stand before you and give you updates. Hey, here's how we're doing towards this objective and some of the initiatives we're pursuing.
But when
And so
somebody
as-
checks off and says that it's completed, the data that shows that it's the superintendent that says, yes, Aaron Newton's got, it's completed.
Sure, yes.
Okay,
Yep.
that was my question.
And so
Sorry.
as our systems get more sophisticated and as our processes get more sophisticated, so should our KPIs, right? And so that, I think, now that we have interim coursework checkpoints, we should develop KPIs out of that. As we get integrated data systems together and we can actually integrate finance and HR, those KPIs should get more sophisticated. And so that, I think we're gonna look to y'all to tell us when you're ready to do that, because the stuff has to be in place. But ultimately, yes, the ideal would be to get away from STAR, which is so lagging, and get to something that is more kind of like in the moment, like this is how we're doing this month.
That's the interim that I thought the district created.
We are.
The interims are used
Yeah.
at a teacher level. So interims really inform their classroom instruction. And so, you know, depending on interims can change from year to year. They're also not a predictor of milestones. So I just want to, you know, kind of level set on the interims really are the work at the school level where teacher teams are digging in and then adjusting their instruction. And so we don't report out on an interim as like a percentage. I wouldn't send home a report that said, this student got an 80% on an interim. It really is course and unit. It's very, very specific and drives individual teacher instruction.
Okay. Understood.
And
Yeah.
your STAR assessments are the actual assessments that are aligned to more closely aligned to what would be the predictor of
Yeah.
success on milestone 1, and 2 is literally what is called out in the law
Mhm.
for, specifically for literacy. Not yet for math, but I bet it's coming
Yeah.
because now you have mathematics, so it's coming.
So I think two things, and perhaps Hans, you and I are just using different words, but some of the KPIs have like specific metrics like by 3%. And then other ones I think just have like topical words. So, for example, in Ben Career College Life Preparedness, it's KPI, CCRPI, readiness, high school graduation rate. But then there's a percent star meaning and exceeding growth. And then there's one for the first one, deliver high quality. And so you maybe a little more specificity, goal setting there, because sometimes it looks more like just the existence of something versus the metric.
Sometimes that is what it is though, right? Sometimes it is literally just do this thing and check the box when that thing is
But the
done.
graduation rate, I thought, was something that, I mean, we have a high graduation rate anyway. So I realized it might be different from the school district with a much lower one, but I thought the whole point was to try to, when possible, increase or preserve. So why wouldn't that be written there? Or the CCRPI score?
Well, I think graduation rate is specifically a measured, right? Like we would be looking at graduation rate as a percentage, and
That's-
probably even some.
But that's why I'm saying that if you look at the first page, it says by 3%. For deliver high quality standards, the KPI, annually increase CCRPI content mastery by 3%.
Well, that just as a point of clarification, Amanda, is the goal of this conversation for us to give you feedback?
Yeah.
Or for us to, that's what I was asking, like what part the superintendent signs off on versus what's our rule, or you just?
Yeah, this is designed to be, right, as Robert indicated, right, a look at where's our health of the strategic plan. So those quarterly strategic plan updates that he mentioned. And so that you kind of know where we are, right? So, thank you. And I'll kind of continue then if that's okay. All right, so just kind of orienting ourselves then to this setup right there. This is what you're looking at. And the key that I was trying to focus in today on too was these major milestones. This is when we met with you last year, what we expected to accomplish this year, what we had laid out to do, and kind of where we are on them. So you can get a sense here of kind of where we're doing. So this work, for example, design and implement professional learning on data-driven instruction for leaders and teachers. We have started that work. And we've done a lot, but we don't feel we're quite there yet. So you will see that that one is in progress, all right, which is why it's yellow. I want to make clear that's not necessarily a bad thing. It means that as we did it, we realized there was more work to be done for it to really truly be meaningful. We're not going to turn it green for the sake of turning green. So there's still some work, but that is in progress, for example. Complete transparency, a lot of them had a June 30th date, and some of them are going to be done by June 30th as well. We're just not quite there yet, all right? So you can get a sense of same kind of thing, supporting principals and teachers and analyzing results, creating those action plans. We've gotten in and done a lot of work, and there's still some more to be done for us to say that we're done with that major milestone and feel good. And we still believe in that major milestone, that it's helping us advance to get to this objective. All right. So here you can just kind of see the sense of where we are, again, with each hitting milestones. All right. Want to pull out here data monitoring systems, again, kind of tied in similar, because all of this, these are very kind of interconnected objectives in many ways too. All right. So questions about like what we're looking at here, at least from like the report perspective and the information I'm giving you.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. I don't know, maybe I should have asked. So we started a conversation earlier, governance operations, so now I'm confused. Is the BMOP governance and operations, or is it governance? Because this sounds like this is truly operational, therefore we're not giving feedback, we're simply getting a readout.
It doesn't have to do with feedback per se.
Yeah, this is, the purpose of this is not to iterate on what the activities would be, or to iterate on the KPIs, or even to iterate on the objectives. We are literally pulling together 16 different initiatives that we have mapped out over 5 years to tell you where we are on activity completion on all 16. So, does that make sense?
Where,
It sounds like it's what I said, then is the BMOP then governance, operations or governance and operation? Because this sounds solely
well,
operational.
just the history on this though is all of the steps taken down at the bottom of this are very much operations.
Right.
But
so-
we very much provided feedback into what those objectives were and what the KPIs were. When he said, for example, let there be light, like whatever that was. But we gave that kind of at the beginning of the plan. My guess is this is a readout on where we
Yep.
are now. And we will be amending, adjusting, or evolving these into the next plan.
When?
28, I guess.
Well, so as the board, here's the strategic plan, right? This is the direction. And we have that plan. And so this is a little bit of update under the hood, right? Looking, so you're not just sitting back saying, oh, you're gonna hit everything by 28. I'm telling you, this is the progress that we've made towards this. This is some of the how. So this is descriptively operational, but it's so that you can do the pulse check and understand where we are on the objective.
And when we choose to re-adopt the plan, what are we doing? I guess that would be, are we making suggestions for tweaks here? Or are we just kind of like boilerplate every year saying, yep, we agree this is good? What if we don't agree? Like, what are we doing annually to re-adopt the plan as we've suggested? And I'm not, smart Alec.
I know, that's a great question, because the board said they wanted to re-adopt the plan. And so that was the consensus statement out of the board self-assessment, was to re-adopt the plan.
But wasn't that the GSBA like self-assessment? We didn't come up with it. I thought it was one of the standards we were supposed to meet.
So maybe we should talk language for a second. I think it makes a ton of sense annually for us to get exactly this kind of detail and exactly this level of weeds. And I would say, probably even more time than we get in this particular session. And on an annual basis, have this kind of heat check on where we are and begin to identify areas that we need to begin shifting our not shifting our focus, but areas where we think need to be emphasized in the next evolution of the plan. So that when we go into in 3 years, or 2 years, I guess, we don't walk into it stone cold. We walk into it with a sense of what the continuation and next set of improvements are.
So typically, you get this in November, and you get this here. So we do it twice a year. So this year in November, we did it at
Conference center.
Decatur Conference Center.
Mhm.
Yeah, we did this at the Decatur Conference Center. So you get it twice a year.
I got the sense that GSBA was talking about some kind of a vote. I mean, I did get the sense that there was,
Re-adopt, like it.
yeah.
I don't think it was.
Again, we should get real clarity on what they mean by re-adopt, because if it's just, we see the information and say, yes, we saw it, that doesn't feel like what they said.
I think what I see, and you can redirect me if you feel differently, is we belong probably in the language of the project scope part. I think when you start to get down into, that's why I was asking for clarity about the milestones.
Yeah.
That's kind of all operational, like exactly how the superintendent gets to the completion of the project scope is beyond us. But maybe the adoption is us looking at each of these kind of scopes. Do we still like it? Do we want to tweak the wording? Do we want to add something, et cetera, et cetera? Maybe that's the what we need to look at annually. And I think maybe what Amanda's trying to show us is that some things are going to be on track to completion at the end of 2028. Like they won't roll over to the next draft plan. Some are going to make it like by the skin of their teeth, and then some, that's what she's also saying is don't be hold your fire, they're gonna get there, and then some we may have to look at, are they gonna be the ones that roll over? I think that's maybe what the timing is, but maybe with the adoption part, we belong up in that project scope. Or
So, and let me read what it says. So I'm gonna read the domain and the standard and the elements. So, domain, the governance leadership team is in collaboration with the community, adopts and enacts a planning process that results in an adopted strategic plan designed to improve student achievement and organizational effectiveness. That's the domain. The standard is annually and as needed, utilizing the adopted strategic planning process. The governance leadership team monitors and reports progress on performance measures.
Okay, so that's
That's the standard.
All right.
Now you can go into the elements. The board implements a strategic plan and reporting performance objectives, measures, targets, effectiveness. The leadership team participates in professional development, focus on the development, implementation, and then it goes further into it, but those are elements, that's not the standard level.
So we're not annually,
voting.
quote unquote, re-adopting or voting. Yeah,
Where did you hear that?
It's on my recollection, we must have the February meeting, is we both landed on, we have not been doing this. We've been talking about the strat plan.
but what Dr. Whitaker just said is really, really helpful. If that's verbatim from GSBA, then it doesn't sound, yeah.
For you.
Then I think we're not, here's the core of my concern, and even with what you were describing, Armin, we could tweak a couple words in a scope and really blow that scope up. And that just scares me.
Set their work back.
Right, like I think we annually review the strategic plan, and if there is a problem that we have to engage on, then that changes the dynamic. And things are moving the way that they should.
And or like what she's saying, if it looks like they're not gonna make it, they're having some struggles, then maybe we need to reword it so that they're successful.
Oh, I don't know.
I appreciate that, I don't know. But
This one, they focus on the how, and the adopted version of this, that's why I like a 3-year strat plan. The world is changing too fast. So as we begin thinking about 2028 new rollouts of some idea, I think looking at a 3-year process makes more sense, because remember, it was built with the community. This wasn't built.
Yeah, this is
Yeah,
So is this sufficient, or do we have to?
no, this is sufficient, because all you're doing is looking at the progress a couple of times a year. I recommend quarterly strat plan updates. Some do twice a year, some do 1 year. Really just have on the complexity of the work.
So we do twice a year, and that is twice a year at the overall. These are the 4 strategic accelerators. Here exactly are where we are. Now, every month, you get an update on something.
correct.
Because
Each of these, again, are moved into a state of, or.
Can I just make a point? Hold on, but before, I want you to understand something. You have a system. The staff, maybe it was the superintendent before you made an agreement. This group has been working on a series of accelerators and initiatives. If you start changing these every year, if you think your teachers are tired now, they're gonna lose their mind. Okay, so the idea of having the board re-adopt a set of priorities and strategic plan goals every year is really just over the top.
Well, I think, yeah, Tracy and I
Well, no,
have interpreted something that we heard,
No,
right? Like, this wasn't arbitrary.
No, it's written right here. It says that annually and as needed, the governance leadership team reviews, assesses the system strategic plan, and the board re-adopts.
That, I remember that, like.
But yeah, I mean, that's what you and I noted, wasn't it?
Okay, and so if
I
you,
could say that's what GSBA did.
I don't know where you found that.
That was.
So the board doc, this was what we discussed in February, because I think the thing that I'm hung up on, I asked when you were out of the room, is this exec summary governance or operations? It sounds like it's an operational feedback. than is the FEMA governance or operations, because what I see is a lot of neat stuff, like we did this, we created Naviance, great, we move on, we don't need to hear that again. In the meantime, and maybe this is not my lane, but then I need to understand where it lives. What if Naviance is a complete failure? So we created it.
Yeah.
But do we have any metric in place to determine, and I'm just throwing that one out of thin air. Where does that go? Because a lot of this is just.
I mean, that's what you, well, I mean, completed, done, but you've given the
Yeah.
superintendent the, authority to make a decision on the use of some technology. She bought Naviance, it's working. My guess is that the metrics that it was intended to impact are either gonna go up or down. That's why you bought Naviance, right? To improve maybe college going, or, I don't really know.
Yeah, it's for Naviance, for example, is a couple things, and there's like a full email, very thoroughly presented by Francis in your inbox, saying, yes, we purchased Naviance, but Naviance is not only to enter recommendations for children to go to high school. It's a part of a larger K-12 implementation to embed career and college and life preparedness. So when you receive the update on it lightly, and I say lightly, because you got it lightly in her second semester presentation last month, but it's also on BMOP for more of an expansive communication along with one goal, because Naviance itself does not live in isolation. You have to pair it with a one goal type of programming so that you can see, well, not only just count who went across the stage with a one goal stash, but really to see where that impact is. But that's an example of, yes, we launched it, but remember, we've always talked about DIME. We design, we implement, we monitor, we evaluate. We are in the implementation, and this is an example of monitor. As we're looking at the results of what we monitor, we then determine how we need to keep the same. That could be the evaluate. It could be that we are going to do a slight tweak and keep going, or it could be this is an epic fail and we need to pivot. But you can't jump to evaluation and making of changes when that's going to the mountains. And I regret I had to walk out, but when Dwayne calls, I answer. So, and that's the high school principal. So when I have the mountain on the first couple of years was a lot of design and implementation. Now we're at the top of the mountain. We are heavily into implementation and monitoring. But you know what? We're picking up a little bit of design right now too, because of AI. So this is some brand new design almost at the end of this strategic plan, but you are constantly diming so that you are constantly, continually improving. And that dime process is happening across 16 objectives on this strategic plan. And this is the readout to share with you where we are in the design, the implementation, the monitoring, or the evaluation. And the evaluation is often given in your board meeting, board work session, and all the different BMOPs.
And what I'm hearing though is that we can, in our quest to meet this improvement part for the board, is that we can, every year, we can go through and you can give us updates, and we can say that we understand what the project scope was, all of what these objectives are, but we can't go shifting the goalposts.
It's reaffirming.
We can say that we understand it, but we can't go with it.
And it goes back to what Dr. Avosa said. The rules of the game, the score,
How much time?
how much time. The strategic plan is a prime example of it.
So I guess the question is, after we get through this.
Yeah.
Have we met we met the standards for reaffirming our strategic plan, or do we
Yeah.
have to go, we have to take it back to an actual meeting?
I do not think so. We will check with GSBA
Okay.
on that. I think no.
Okay.
However, I will check.
All right, I'm gonna keep rolling then. On strategic accelerator 2, same kind of thing. We're used to what orientation and what we're receiving now. But you can see kind of what those major milestones, again, under the hood. Yes, this is operations, but this is the what and the how we're doing the things. And you can see some of them, the way they're worded helps you also know where we are in the design phase as well. Because some of them actually talk about design or initial implementation. So for our future readiness skills, we were at initial implementation of 612 and foundational training, right? So we're getting ready to prepare for implementation there. So you can kind of see where we are in the process as well, based on how those are written. But overall, you can see pretty good help here across. We do have one red item here, not started. It was online platforms for students to join interest-based clubs. I think as we talked a little bit about that, it almost felt like it's one more thing, and we have better ways to manage it right now. And if I'm putting words in your mouth, feel free to jump in. Karen, I see your head nodding.
Yeah, we did a survey or, an audit of the interest-based clubs we're offering, and we had over 2. And so we began to wonder if we even need like this online way of joining interest-based clubs. Like, really, is that the answer? And with all of the controversy around screen time, like, do we want to go down that road anymore? I think it's one that kind of has got lost in the shuffle, and we need to revisit it to see what our direction is on.
Because this is what we anticipated, but as we gathered input, it was like, oh, wow, we learned something new. So we might need to kind of redesign right here what the next step is to make sure that we.
And do students feel like they have trouble finding clubs that they might be interested in? I guess that would be the core question that I would have. And that might not be answerable right now. Like, the students all think that they can find what they want and they like what they can find and it's all there and they don't.
Started if it
Yeah,
wasn't
like,
like
yeah, it's not broken, don't fix it, I guess.
Yeah.
Remember, this is, how do you ensure that your traditionally marginalized children can feel, this is about engaging in inclusivity. So that's why we had it. And so once you do the focus groups, I mean, you've heard how our Canvas visits include not only the instruction, but also the culture piece. As we're learning, we bring them in.
When I read this too, I'm just wondering, expand and diversify student offerings to address academic, arts, athletic, and effective needs. When I read the bullet point, it just has to do with clubs, but I'm also wondering, does that expand and diversify student offerings include courses and
It
things like
does.
that?
We met, so in 2024, update math and ELA courses, including AP courses at the high school with earning credit in middle school. We did that. So this is just for,
like this.
For this particular year.
If young, like, we actually mentioned this in one of our evaluations, I'm trying to remember which one you talked about, where we said, actually, we've been so successful at adding a bunch of courses that maybe what we need to focus on now is structuring it so that parents don't get lost in the chaos of what's out there. Like, it's almost like we pushed that rock up the hill really far.
It's page 15.
You'll see some of the already complete ones from the last year with the academic.
That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, in strategic accelerator 3, that high quality professional piece. Obviously, you guys know the work that you've been doing around compensation. There's some information here around some of the others. What I want to draw your attention to was we had planned to partner with the Center for Black Educator Development this year. That actually got canceled as we did some exploration, again, kind of the design phases, the financing pieces, all of that stuff. There were reasons to kind of say, we need to make a little bit of a pivot there. So the reason why you'll see a gray here as you look under the hood is we had to change our strategy just a little bit. So again, overall health is still in a good place to meeting these. And again, same thing here, you'll see a lot of in progress. Again, work is being done. Some of these are annual things that are done every year as well, and you'll see that noted on the executive summaries as well, because this is something that's done annually. So again, it will be in process as we continue to kind of work those things. But heard on making sure we continue to focus on making explicit some of the milestones and things that we're doing around retention strategies as well. And our last strategic accelerator, organizational effectiveness and excellence, again, read out here. You'll see the one that has some reds here, have to do with build an environmentally friendly early childhood learning center. We did hit some things, but there are some things as well. We haven't started the training for teachers. We haven't done all of these pieces right here. We know that there's been some barriers and road bumps there along the way.
Can you tell us a little bit about the training of staff? Because that would feel like it's not linked necessarily to.
Yeah, I'm gonna let Burton chime in on that one.
Okay.
So this was training for Fraser Center staff. And the plan, once we kind of got through, is really to do that would be next year's second semester. And the idea was that then they would move into the building in the fall of 27.
But I think we recognize that there are complications associated with the building. And in any scenario, it's going to be delayed, right? And so is there a way to decouple that training from the facility?
The training will happen for Fraser Center. It's just, honestly, when we planned these milestones several years ago, the date honestly was just off. In planning and getting ready, it really is a January, first semester of 2027.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And again, in progress, we've made progress on ADA accessibility, but it's not done, right? So we're still continuing to make progress there as well. So again, kind of readouts here of where we are. You do have copies of all of the executive summaries, as well as they are posted live on Assembly as of where we are today too. So that's there. So as we look ahead, we talked a little bit about KPIs. I told you that I gave you the report from last year, this year. In November, we expect most of them to be available again in November. So you'll hear, as of now, per the BMOP, an update on that. As we look at
one piece I do want to say.
Yeah.
ELA may or may not be available because they're new standards, and so from a psychometrics at the state level, they may not. So
Yes.
right now, you see the tilde there. So that's what I don't want you to hold me.
Don't hold us to it.
Necessarily.
We will report them as we get them, and we're at the whim of the state on that. As we look to next year, obviously, we're coming down that mountain, but we're in continued implementation of the strategic plan. And we'll start talking about our processes for creating the next strategic plan. So as we look into next year, we'll start researching that so that in 27, 28, it'll be our final year of implementation of the all indicator strategic plan that we have now. And we will really be launching and running the process to adopt the new strategic plan throughout the 27, 28 school year, so that it'll be ready to go with the beginning of the 28, 29, my God, school year. So just so that you can kind of see where we are in the strategic plan cycle. All right. Break time.
Few waivers.
She did.
I'm sorry.
Oh, this one? No. Oh, what the? I felt that appropriately captured my 16-year-old sentiment towards joviality.
It has to be law enforcement.
I mean, it's healthy, they don't do any different.
Right.
But it's like, I look at it. And they haven't, yeah, I mean, there's so much, it's just a whole nother mechanism.
Yeah.
People do it with adults, right? But it's, yeah.
What time was lunch?
Especially with the social media.
And what time? So,
You get close so they get to their neighborhoods back in the day, right?
Yeah.
Now people all right.
Let me show you. Yeah. Like, I had no idea.
So, I don't know when, where, or how,
Probably.
but I lost its earring somewhere, but it could have been. What does it look like?
Yeah. I turned the door, like, I didn't
Like, I was like, oh, lovely.
Yeah.
I just like having an earring, but I don't, it could have been here, it could have been somewhere else.
It's, I don't, you can tell proportionately, it's not big, like, it's like this, like, it's not. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
That's like $400 to $500.
So.
Sorry, right. I can what? Turn it into a little jewelry, yeah, like a little hoop check, yeah, or not a little one, like a moderate size hoop check, yeah. But it was cool, I learned how to use all the tools. All the pots, yeah, it was great.
Ready? Yeah, I think. Ready?
All right.
Yes. Ready?
All right. Good afternoon, Board Chair Dr. Sullivan, Vice Chair esteemed board members, and Superintendent Dr. Whitaker. I'm Jarvis Adams, your Chief Operations Officer. Today, I will give you a brief overview of SPLOST 7 and outline the upcoming action that the board needs to take for the city schools of Decatur to participate in the November referendum. As you know, this work aligns right with our strategic accelerator number 4, organizational effectiveness and excellence. eSPLOST, like Dr. Volta said earlier, is a critical tool that allows us to maintain and improve our facilities and support teaching in support of teaching and learning. Today, I'll briefly give you an overview of what eSPLOST is, what our projected funding looks like, what board action you all must take in June to make sure we're on the next referendum, and what the next steps after June meeting will be. eSPLOST is a 1-cent sales tax. It includes facility improvements, maintenance and repairs, new construction, technology, transportation, and infrastructure. It's important to note that these funds cannot be used for salaries or general operations. Simply put, this is how we maintain and improve our learning environments across city schools of Decatur. I'm sorry if I shouted in there. What East Plus is not. To be clear, East Plus is not a property tax and is not a general operating revenue. It can be used for staff. It cannot be used for staffing or programs. And all funds are restricted to board-approved capital projects. Additionally, it requires voter approval through a referendum, ensuring transparency and accountability. Earlier, I stepped out to get on a call with the other school districts, our partners, for our SPLOS when we talked about this funding overview. And so there's one change that will be taking place that I'll talk about. Right now, the total DeKalb County program is looking at $950 million. We're advised that that number is going to fluctuate a little bit, so it won't be as even as 950 million, but it's going to be right there in that ballpark. Allocation is based on FTE. So city schools of Decatur, DeKalb County, and Atlanta Public Schools are together. Then Atlanta Public Schools are together with Fulton County because just the way the region is split up. Our FTE should get us anywhere between 5 to 6%. That's October FTE next year. And so if that is the case, we're estimated to receive around $57 million. Now that's $57 million over 5 years. Right here, you see I have up to an annual funding of $11 to $12 million. That can vary based on what collections come in as. So we cannot see what's going to happen in 2032, but there's a lot of tools and a lot of specialized people that we've talked to over the past couple of days, and that we'll continue to talk to that gave us a pretty safe forecast of this number. What is next? Right now, this is your board retreat overview and discussion. I can answer any questions that you may have. In the June 2nd board meeting, I'm going to bring you the joint resolution that's being worked on between City Schools of Decatur, DeKalb County Schools, and Atlanta Public Schools. I'm going to bring that to you in June. There's a portion of it that's just exclusively City Schools of Decatur. It'll be 3 sections. All of us have our section. And then we would need for you all to vote to approve for us to go into the joint resolution. In August, we have to prepare that for referendum. And what that means is we have to get those documents over to the Board of Elections. They have to prep those 90 days prior to the next election, which is in November. So those documents need to be completed by August 4th. So our next steps, we continue coordination with our regional partners. Again, that's the DeKalb County Schools and Atlanta Public Schools, and our legal counsel. So our legal counsels are really making sure that everything is aligned. Right now, DeKalb County is holding the master copy, and we're changing everything on that. So when I come back to you in June, you'll see the May 29th is our deadline for the 3 school districts to have everything finalized. So that's what I'll be bringing to you in June. We'll finalize project priorities, funding allocations, and then we'll present the proposed resolution to you all in June in preparation for the November vote. That was a quick overview, and I'm here to answer any questions. Okay.
So one, I can't remember, if for this kind of East Plus, does each school district need to detail the specific projects or just a global kind of school improvement or facility improvement?
So it's kind of both. Because if there's a specific thing you're gonna do, I think you can talking about doing something with food.
Yeah.
So that's gonna be more specific. But then when you think about just general maintenance of the building, it's gonna be vague. Because over 5 years, you would think it all HVACs would last, but they didn't.
And then how does it work in terms of, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, it just dawned on me. So you've got DeKalb, part of APS, and Decatur, but ultimately, does each voting block, right? So let's just say hypothetically, DeKalb voters reject it, but CSD voters approve it.
So we are.
It's gotta be all or none.
Yeah, we're all in it.
But in reality, if all of Decatur rejected it, but the the majority of CAP voted for it, or
It's still
still
passed.
gonna pass.
Yes.
And
still passed.
CSD would still get it even if CSD voters. Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, it's a regional all or nothing.
Yeah.
And so in doing this and preparing for this East Plus, Bryan County, which is out here now, they did not get East Plus. Their voters for some reason voted against it. And it really hurt. I don't think that will happen again, but that really hurt. Like Dr. Bosa said, I talk with people from Florida, I talk to people from all over, that's in my same role. Our funding mechanism in Georgia, coupled with capital outlay, is far better than most other states. So we have a really good funding mechanism. Capital fund.
And for
Capital fund.
For counties like Bryan County, if the voters did vote it down, they put it back on the ballot.
Put it back on the ballot.
the next year.
Yeah, because Bryan County is one of these counties that's one of the fastest growing counties in the southeast of the United States. So their population is growing and not having that money, it put a damper on it in a major way.
Okay, now I'm sorry. So I understand DeKalb County, you're right. I understand Decatur. But when it comes to APS, then it's just this like carved out block.
So, and I may be wrong, so you think that Kirkwood area, I think
Yeah.
home, that school over there. So you have some of Atlanta that falls in DeKalb County.
Yep.
And that's why they're included. So ours is 57 million, they're gonna be around 39 million. So it's not but they'll get some more on the Worth County side. A lot more, actually.
Yeah, I guess in theory, they could get approved on the CAB side and disapproved on the Hope side, but
But when you're preparing the East Plus, how much input do we have really to develop the language for it?
Which is prescribed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what.
Well, the language is prescribed, but I think we're back to like, is it an across the board? Do all three entities need to agree that it's a more generalized description of facilities improvements versus, one district is saying, we're gonna purchase 6 buses and we're gonna build a, I don't know, gym, whereas another district is simply like, it doesn't matter how specific one district is and how generalized another is.
Right. And so there's gonna be 3 portions to it, what you receive. You're gonna see the Atlanta version, APS version. Of course, you're not voting on that. You're gonna see the DeKalb County schools and then you'll see city schools of Decatur. And so what's in city schools of Decatur is our thing.
But I think what he's saying is that I don't know if it's advantageous to be super specific because what you use those funds for in year 4, very different.
It's a
Why
very
will
delicate
voters
balance.
reject it if it's too
What?
vague?
It's a delicate balance
Yeah.
of being specific in general,
Yeah.
because like Mr. Adams was saying, you don't know 5 years from now what every single school necessarily might need or what needs, so you want it general enough to capture that. But if you know there are specific projects, you can.
Can we just get the language that was approved last time by voters? Like, what did CST submit to be in this last one? It would be.
I mean, we're not wrong.
No, I know, but
I
haven't read it.
Okay.
Yeah, I might be.
I think it was general.
Yeah, okay.
So that's the decision that's before us when we develop these buses.
So your decision is, are we able to join this joint resolution to go
Okay,
towards lots?
seems like a no. Yeah.
Why would we do
No,
it?
it seems like definitely do.
Oh.
Thank you.
I'm sorry for that stare.
Can I ask, why, so I'm going to infer that we could instead do our own and just limit it to CSD, just like the CAB could do its own
No.
and limit it, no.
The county.
Well, I knew that with Decatur and DeKalb, I didn't realize the APS.
Well, because APS is in.
Yeah, no, I get it now.
Any other questions? No questions, I'm glad you said no brainer.
No worries. Do it. Go to money. Well,
What a sweet social grading bee. Right? Maybe not, maybe not. Okay, so I'll be sharing with you all this afternoon an overview of where we've been with grading, where we are, and where we're going. So, grading is always a hot topic in the school system, right? There's a lot of controversy, opinions about what should be graded, what should be graded, why. We started on this journey of changing how we grade back in 2009. And we started the standards-based grading journey. And I remember the report card for elementary was 3 pages long because we attempted to grade every single standard that kids were presented with. And it was insanity, right? But we did that for some time. Along came IB, and middle and high school kind of migrated to using the IB grading scale of 1 to 7 for their grading to kind of mirror what we were doing at the K-5 level with the 1 to 4 grading. It was written in our charter in 2013 that middle and high would no longer focus on standards-based grading, but they would do IB criterion grading. Which brought us to 2021, where we were looking at all of this because parents really didn't know what these grades meant. And if I had to be honest, some of us who were working in schools could not articulate that well. And so we had inequities in how grades were being assigned. Some grades were being assigned based upon mastery. Some were, the kid really worked hard, so let's push them over the threshold of passing. And some, we still don't know to this day where they came from. That's the reality of where we were. So in 2022, a grading task force was formed and they did a foot study on equitable grading. And they looked at all of the best practices around grading and how to make it equitable for all students, put forth some recommendations. Some of those were taken, some of those fell by the wayside. And we were in this gray area around what was changing and what was not changing. So now into 2023, this was Dr. Whitaker's entrance as superintendent, and we started the school year and parents were like, whoa, something's changing and nobody told us. And that's on us because we did change some things and it wasn't clear about what was changing and why. So we took a step back. We looked at all of the things. I think Hans and Carmen were there when we did that first community meeting around grading, and it was a hot fire. So we landed on some things, right? We landed on, we're gonna keep this the way it is, we'll change this, and we're gonna write a policy because a policy did not exist around grading. So that policy was written the next school year through surveying and conversations. We got input from tons of people, and the policy was written. So once the policy was written, then we went into regulations. How are we going to implement this policy to make sure that we're upholding the things that we were charged to do? So in our policy, these things were established. Our purpose for grading, how we were going to honor AP and IB credits, final grades for EOC, students' growth and mastery, expectations, retakes, multiple assessment opportunities. To establish that in policy. And so then we set out to implement that policy. And so here are some of the things that we have done. We made sure that we established grading calculations, GPA calculations were calibrated, normalized, define what reteaching, retaking, and assessment procedures could look like, and so on and so forth. This is just an overview. I went through this a little bit when I started, but kind of shows you where we were before. We didn't have any guidance on what should or should not go in the grade book. We only used summative assessment. So the end of the unit assessment, that was the only thing that was calculated into the final grade. We had effort as a part of how we graded, and there was some disagreement around that. And we continue to have just a lack of clarity around what we were doing and why. We had some interim moves in between where we are now. We tried mode at the middle school level. That did work. So we transitioned to averaging across the board 612. And here we are now. K5 remains on the 1-4 scale. 612 is on the 0 to 100 scale, really a 50 to 100 scale, because you cannot get a grade lower than 50. Kids can't really recover from those zeros. We do an 80-20 split, with 80% of the grade being the assessments, 20% being standards-based tasks, which are any other things that teachers want to grade that are aligned to standards. So it's not just some fun activity, color the page and we're trying to grade it, but it has to be aligned to standards. And we use that weighted average across the board. The feedback I've gotten from parents and students and teachers is that they have better clarity around what these grades mean. It's streamlined, so when you leave middle school, you go to high school, the grading is the same. Just, I believe it was last week, we received an email from a parent who said, at first I wasn't sure, but when my child's grade in her class correlated to the outcome on her EOC, then I feel like we're on the right track, because if her grade in class is saying the same thing on the standardized test, I have more confidence that teachers are grading appropriately. We have more clarity for transcripts and transference to college and universities, because we were having to take that 1 to 7, recalculate it to a 0 to 100 scale, and then at the end, reveal, surprise, it's a B, and people really didn't know how we got there. So we have more clarity around that, and support for building stronger assessment through our teaching and learning department. There were some questions around why the 80-20. So we took a look at what we've done, what is done across metro districts. And this is something that we did along the way as well, but we revisited this. And we also looked at what districts actually put their weight calculations in policy, and only one did, and that's Fulton. So they wrote in policy that, and it's actually different. So these percentages pretty much represent high school, because there was so much variation. I just stuck with high school. But the high school level, 55% of what they call major assessments are graded in comparison to 35 minors and 10% practice. All of the other districts, they were either in regulations or in practice, not well documented across the board, and the percentages would change based upon elementary, middle, or high. And then you have City Schools of Decatur at 80.
But that our 80-20 is at the regulation level, not a policy level, just to
Regulation. Yep.
And can I ask you about the ones on top? Because I saw that like Midtown High School, not Atlanta Public Schools, varies the percentage weight depending on AP or non-AP. So with Marietta and Buford, do we know what's determining whether it's 70% or 80%?
In many of these districts, they let schools decide.
Yeah.
And so there isn't a standard across the board. Even when you see, so like the CAP 30-70, that's not consistent across the CAP county schools.
Yeah, because I think we have like 3 categories, like tests and quizzes is one, guided classwork is another, and then assessment. Like we do more, I thought. Well, anyway, it's the same math.
This 70% represents all of that. Whatever isn't considered the summative assessment. This could be homework, classwork, whatever people classify, other than.
Why are we kind of closed heavily on summatives versus others? Like, what's our philosophy for that?
I was gonna ask that too, like, what is best practice in literature?
Yeah. So in the research, mainly what came out of the equitable task force is that you want to ensure that you are showing students that the grades are reflecting students' mastery of the standards. A lot of this is the process of learning, and a lot of this is the output of learning, right? And so we wanted to make sure that we were reflecting with enough time what students have mastered and not penalize them so much for their process.
As a father of an extreme ADHD child, I can tell you that the summatives do not always link to their mastery. So I don't love that we're an outlier.
Well, I think the question I have is more of not me as a parent or me as a teacher, just the process. So if part of learning is the process, not just the test, because you already have SAT, you have ACT, you have milestone, you have AP, you have IB, then what is the logical rationale to add another test as opposed to those other things? Like learning how to do homework in high school is going to, I think, maybe the research bears out differently, help a student better prepare in college when you don't have all of the checks along the way. So if you never learned how to do homework, now you go to college, and my students and I were just looking at Georgia State syllabi, you have 3 assignments.
Yeah.
And in fact, even at the college level syllabi, like the first essay is 15%, the second is 25, the third is 35. So I'm more concerned about where the process part of learning falls into here if we are relying so heavily on just a summative.
We cannot assume that every student in high school is taking AP, IB, or college bound.
No, of course not. That's why I mentioned milestones. I think we have a test. I mean, I don't know, someone else could correct me. I think most students, whether it's the STAR test, which is for reading, but we could look and see at the grade band levels how I think within reason, every student is taking some standardized test, either because of end of course test or EOG, and then the others. I don't know what CTAE requires.
So you have a couple of things. Some of the stuff you're talking about are work habits, and so developing those work habits. And we don't want to grade your work habits. You don't want to grade homework because you could be grading how much support you have at home versus what you can independently show that you know and can do. In some cases, parents are doing students' homework and they aren't developing those skills. We do have a separate area around work habits. It's called something different at different levels depending on their programming. EL calls it one thing, IB calls it something else. But we do have a space where teachers can monitor and comment on that versus can you do this particular thing?
Fine with the homework, but what about in class? So like if the 20% is a spit, whether it's a benchmark or a reading quiz or a math quiz, so then what about in the classroom work habits? Because I guess, I don't know, it just seems philosophically we would want to ensure that the indication of learning isn't just the test or the quiz. And right now, I guess I'm curious as to where that indication of learning besides a test and a quiz
is here. These aren't necessarily quizzes.
So I do very much agree with Board Member Anderson that I think the process of it matters. I think you can put controls in place to try to manage parents that over-engage, because I agree that we want to be able to show student mastery. But even apropos of none of this discussion, we are an outlier in the data. And I just, why are we like, there are great school systems up here that we aren't benchmarked to. And so I'm just curious why we would choose to be an outlier.
There is no benchmark is what I mean.
Oh, no. We pretty consistently see that roughly 70-30 is the benchmark. It's roughly 70-30. There are a couple outliers there. 75-25, I would argue, falls 70-30, but 1, 2, 3, 4 school systems kind of sit in the
Which
70,
we think
30
is that's
range.
an average amongst,
Yeah, I
like,
do
the
wanna
cap,
caution
that
you,
were
though.
high schools.
Yeah,
Nobody, except at sometimes Beaufort is where we're at. Everybody else is below.
no, I want to caution you because this is as best as I could get from all of the variation that people do.
I get,
So,
I get that that's highly variable
Yeah.
to the extent that the best that you can get is normalized, and we are looking at the normal curve of the distribution of it. We are in the outlier side of that.
One of the things that we know to be true around grading, and specifically at the secondary level in the city schools of Decatur, there has been great level of intentionality to do this regulation work with the actual state. So earlier today, we were talking about how focus groups from students help to inform whether or not we're going to create a new survey around, do you have a club? The same intentionality was taken and has been through the entire grading journey. From day one, when I learned we have no grading policy.
I mean, this is better than nothing, right?
So, but right now you're at the regulation level. So we worked year one plus at the policy level. And then worked of year 2 and 3 to get us to where we are at the regulation level. But it was in concert with the teachers who have to implement. And so there was if you remember, a lot of pushback around even the policy for grading. So that's why when we talk about having teacher agency, which is going back to the conversations around retention and such, specifically at the secondary level, this is why, to tell you the truth, that's why we're sitting here at an 80-20.
So we, like, does CSD have teacher surveys where these are the data points in the majority of the high school teachers? Because I believe we're looking at high school only right now, right? Really?
That was in the middle school, right?
We're high school and middle school, but these benchmarks are all high school.
Secondary.
That's what I thought,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Pretty much
specific to
secondary.
high school, now that it's 2 years in, what are the?
Just to make sure I understand too, with summative, that's just a test or includes quizzes?
Test projects.
I know those are the major.
Like
tests.
an
Yeah, that
independent
does
test.
seem like.
No, but they're also
it can be-
projects.
I understand the
yeah.
piece you were
The
talking about,
major.
making sure the student mastery level is there, but I also kind of agree with Tracy and Hans in terms of, it's also the process and the steps of getting there.
I want us to be cautious too. So let me take it to a policy level,
Yeah.
right? Let me just talk that at a policy level. I very much agree with the policy concept that we do not want to disadvantage some kids, right? That going from the sort of arbitrary process where we were before, we all know which kids got disadvantaged under that, right? But it is without question, because I watched this in my own household and I know the data backs this up. ADHD and attention deficit challenged kids struggle on tests. And it is not always a perfectly accurate assessment of their knowledge, right? And so at a policy level, I want to make sure we are accounting for the best and the brightest research around attention deficit children, and that our weights are not inappropriately also disadvantaging those kids. That's the policy. And I would strongly argue that if we have selected limits that don't line up with other benchmarks, why, and let's maybe rethink that.
And I hear that, but more so than any of these numbers is how teachers are assessing in the classroom to accommodate and to meet the needs of kids, knowing who they are as learners. It could be any of this, and it could disadvantage the student if that isn't properly.
That I understand. Yeah.
Yeah, So let's just take a look here.
But can I ask a question about that? Because I think the numbers are flipped.
Yeah.
I think it's supposed to be 4 summatives, that's the minimum, and 6 spits. Because basically, if you take the 80%, which is kind of shocking to me, because then I think our grading, I looked it up yesterday because someone came to me when they looked at this agenda. And so that grading, like quick facts, specifically says there'll be a minimum of 4 summatives by the end of the semester. So it's 80%, that's like a college final weight
It
for
is a
each
huge weight.
test that a student has. But so those numbers are flipped though. So typically students are gonna have 4 summatives and 6 spits. I think, if that matters to
Yeah.
the readout.
It
Because
can.
then it does exactly what Hans and I are talking about. Those summatives. Anyway, so that's.
So this first assessment data thing, if it is flipped the way that Tracy is saying, and 6 come in at 79 and 4 come in at 90, or are you saying?
I don't know, it's just that typically, according to the grading thing and just my own parental experience, because I look at Infinite Campus a lot more than I wished I did. That's a whole other topic, but there are minimum of 4 per semester. And so that is factually what I'm seeing. And the spits are the little assignments. They're like the quizzes. So that number would flip if it matters.
But what you will see when we get to the next one, it because we're using examples where the higher score is either at the 4 assessments or the 6, you're gonna see the same calculation, even though you're right, it is 4 summatives and 6 standards-based tasks, but we flip it on the next slide, so you'll see the difference.
I don't disagree with what you're saying. Some of these do carry a lot of weight, especially if you get towards like the 8th grade and upwards. I worry that if we have the conversation about or push to have the intermittent quizzes or the formatives count more, this is like a point in their journey where they're still learning. So they're gonna make mistakes. And how we've been putting pressure on them to perform kind of midstream, you know what I mean? And you know, it's still where the summatives count more. I appreciate that. But you know, and I'm sure there's some creative ways to deter the feline, but you know, I think they are going to make some mistakes because they're just still learning the material. I can see both sides of the argument here. If you go up on the push or the weight of that, they at some points they're getting these formatives or these quizzes or these kind of little assignments like a week into a unit, and they just.
But I think the bigger issue is, and maybe that's okay, if you get like 2 C's on a summative,
That's your grade in the class.
that's your grade, like you are no longer.
So may I make a big devil's advocate on the way out? So on one hand, earlier, we're talking about the importance of supporting our teachers, right? They've come up with this. We didn't tell them to do this 80-20.
Well,
Hold on.
wait, are we certain about that? It
Well,
was
I mean,
the teachers that, I just want to make sure we're clear about that. It was the teachers that created
A
this.
lot of work going back and forth about these percentages for an entire school year feedback.
Now, remember, when you say teachers, it doesn't mean 100% of them were involved.
No, I think we
Or
understand that.
100% were
No,
not.
I understand that. I just want to make sure
Yeah.
because that's not kind of
No,
what I
Yes.
thought. So, okay.
I mean, you guys have to make a decision. So on one hand, we say we want to empower our teachers, give them the you know, I'm just pushing back. I do though agree with you that 80-20 seems out of alignment with the others. I don't disagree with that. I think 30 is too low. I don't remember which district that was.
That's the
That seems really low, right? Because that's not the reality of the world you come to. When you go take a test, the SAT, it's high stakes.
Well, I think that's the other issue though. I mean, what I see is the grades have a financial consequence. It's like hope. They're an emotional thing, which is something I think that needs to be recognized. And then there's the objective part of it. And so what I am hearing is that we don't really have an objective way to explain right now why CSD landed on 80-20. So that's one thing that I see needs to be.
I wouldn't say we don't have an objective way that we landed on here. We did a process and as I said, we did a lot of work with that equitable grading task force, so we went back to a lot of that. Prior to this, it was 100% summative assessment.
There's no question that
Yeah,
this
no,
is
I
better
appreciate
than where we
it.
were. This is
Yeah.
better than where we were.
Wait, hold on,
And-
is there permission to let her finish?
I forgot my thought, but thank you. But what I wanted, I guess my point is I don't want us to leave thinking we didn't have a process for where we landed that included teacher feedback at the core of it, because we did. Now, if we want to, after time, go back and revisit, this, then we can certainly take it back to the teachers. And we have changed quite a bit over time, and parents, you know, I don't know how much more they can digest, or if there are other things that we can stabilize in order to kind of look at this, but I don't want us to say that we didn't have a process for how we landed.
How long has the 80-20 been in effect?
2 years.
2 years, because like, you know, I totally understand and respect if this is coming from the teachers, but also understanding, okay, now that it's been in play for a couple of years and teachers have seen how it kind of, you know, works, maybe it's time to tweak it or think about the big picture, like we said, seeing how it's a big outlier compared to others, right? And if we want to be cognizant of equity, of course, and not disadvantage kids who may not have all the supports and tutors at home, right? Versus kids, you know, who don't have that or have it in the classroom, there's still work they do, right?
Yeah,
There's the process too in the classroom
yeah.
that seems to maybe not being weighted as much as it could or should be.
This is our first full year with this weighted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the calculation changed a little bit, so
Okay.
2-year journey, but 1 full year.
Yeah, really.
I think,
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
I think it's safe to say that, and if this wasn't said clearly at the beginning, I'll say it right now. We're in a much better place than where we were, right? So saying that, like, we get, we're at 80-20, however we decide to break it out, is vastly superior than arbitrary,
Nothing.
which is kind of how it felt before. But so now we have a year worth of data behind us. We've looked at it in this period of time. My reaction is, as the father of an ADHD child, I question how much this comports to equity for children that struggle with that. And 2, just based on the benchmarks that you guys have shown us, nothing that we pulled up, but that you guys have shown us, it looks like we're a little bit of an outlier. So I'm wondering if it isn't time to maybe take it back and start having a conversation about in terms of continuous improvement. Not to say that getting here was bad, but we can continually tweak and improve.
I'm wondering what teachers are
Yeah.
saying after
Yeah.
1 year,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we did a survey.
I do want to hear what.
We did a survey at the end
The
of
teacher.
last school year. We did not do one
Okay.
this school year.
Yeah.
But that's something we can go back and see.
So I think another thing is, NPR had a story about this sometime in the last few months, maybe the last year, even revisiting the equitable grading practice, because school districts all over the country are doing different things. Some have a no late work policy. Ask teachers how they like that, they don't. Ask students how they like the idea that you know, start with a 50, and then I can't remember, there's one other one that's kind of their free standard. This is just me personally, the 50 is unintelligible, you know, as a parent looking at grades, as a teacher trying to figure out, you know, then you look at a paper and you're like, oh, so that was an F, right? You earned 25 points. Then some quizzes are calculated with, out of 100, some have 5. So like, I would like to say, first and foremost, that I think we need to revisit how the equitable grading practice that got us here is actually working. So like, we started with the anecdote of the mom who said, hey, this is great, my students' test scores match the grades. Well, where are we now? And then, you know, I don't know if this fits into it, but the retake, because that's a whole other, like, Wild West, it's a nice opportunity, but then you're gonna have students that work it. I'd love to know what teachers say about that too. And then finally, as a side note, and I appreciate that you were recognizing, because when I was looking, I couldn't find, which is kind of ironic, because I guess school districts don't like to publish this, but you know, our students at a particular level are kind of possibly, for the ones that are doing AP and stuff, at a disadvantage, because I appreciate that the district did the half point for the honors English and math, but and we're rolling in AP, but you're looking at your 10th and 11th graders who had an 80-20 when other districts didn't, and didn't have access to AP or IB classes ninth grade. So I think I feel like we could do a much better job looking at each discrete grade level. It sounds like the younger high school students are going to be phased in nicely. I could be wrong, but certainly the seniors I know, oh, it's a different thing each year. And then that's a whole other thing, I guess transcript is regulation, but.
I think to piggyback off that, I think maybe some part of this conversation, aside from that 80-20, 70-30, whatever, I'll need to hear the content expert on this. This is not what I do professionally. There has to be some way to make sure that at the core of it, the grade means something. Did they walk away understanding?
Yep.
Did they get the standard? It has to be benchmarked against not even DeKalb County Schools, but some other method of making sure that at the end of the course, they've grasped the knowledge. So that I feel like that's a better way of making sure that the grading method works. Like I tell my kids all the time, I don't care what your grade is, really, do you understand? Otherwise, we're just stressing out over some letters on a piece of paper. It's just feedback. But at the end of it, if you got an A and you still don't get it, then somewhere something is broken down. So
The exact inverse is what I'm talking about too, just to piggyback on that, where a child absolutely gets it, understands it, soup to nuts, and can explain it, cannot reflect it on a test. This has not happened to me. I did not believe it until I see it with two of my kids. It is exactly the situation that happens. Full knowledge of the material, cannot regurgitate it for a test. And that just the nature of the reality of it.
And I still say that the classroom.
Well, also, maybe so, I didn't want to curb the conversation because I didn't feel like the feedback is important.
Yep.
But I want to caution of not getting so far into the weeds. Because I will say that I know that there are a lot of things that happen in the classroom that are individualized to students, not just an IEP or a 504 plan, but it's some teachers decide and it's within their discretion to say, I'm gonna drop your lowest grade, or I'm only gonna take the top 2 grades of the 4 assessments. Some teachers say, I'm allowing unlimited retakes. So those are the things that teachers can do with discretion that may not be reflected in those numbers. So I just caution you all about getting too far in the weeds of telling the administration the how.
Fair enough.
Yeah, because any system is only as good as you work it. And thank you for that segue, because teachers do have discretion in how they design their summatives, how they're administered, as well as other opportunities for standards-based tasks. These things are minimum.
Wait, I do have to get that clarified though, because we're pretty clear that, in our which I appreciate, that grading policy, and then we have the handbook, which is a few pages long. I think it's pretty clear the whole reason we did some of this is for standardization. So I'm afraid anyone listening now is going to get the wrong idea that if you lucked out and got that teacher, your 2 lowest summatives were dropped, but if you got that teacher, good luck. So can we fill that in somehow? Because I can't imagine if we're doing standards-based and consistency that we have that level of discrepancy.
It's not about discrepancy. We have minimums so that we don't have 2 grades in the grade book that's determining a student's grade. So that sets the bar for just at a minimum, you must have this number in order to
Okay, so
have some validity.
understood. Let me just close the loop there. They will minimally have 4 summatives, but a teacher might give 6 summatives and choose to drop 2 of the summatives.
So what we ask at the grade level is that if you're on a teaching team, that you make those decisions together. So if you're looking at the assessment results and the teachers say, you know what, most of our kids really didn't do well on that assessment, we need to go back and reteach it. That wasn't a fair assessment. Then together they make those agreements, so you're not over here doing something that traces.
Gotcha. Okay. All right.
So that's the purpose of the PLC and some of the work that goes on there. Will we still have some differences? Yeah, we're not perfect people, and teachers sometimes close their doors. and do whatever, but we shouldn't see huge differences, on that. But it's a work in progress.
I wasn't
That's the
suggesting
work
that
we
it's
do
like
every
the
day.
Wild West out there.
Yeah, it's not.
No, but it's good. We got
I
folks
mean,
listening.
I'm
So.
just saying, there's discretion to
Yeah.
account
There
for.
are. And
Yes.
But I
we
like-
emphasize that they should be, those decisions should be made collaboratively as a team.
At the school level.
Yes, at the school level, it's a teacher PLC. Okay, where we're headed next, we are transitioning to semester credits next school year at Decatur High School, which is, another change. We're gonna continue to monitor and implement across schools for consistency with the policy and regulations. We still have pockets of work to improve upon. Continue with our professional learning. Also putting an eye on counselors and administration and transcript practices. We want to do a third-party audit so that we can get feedback on what we're doing well, what we're not doing well, so we can reduce errors, because we do have some errors that we are consistently kind of trying to figure out how we got there, and continuous improvement for grading and reporting.
Just since these are public documents and they're out there for everybody, can we make sure that we go back and edit the slides that have the 4 versus the 6 and make sure the calculations match what is actually happening? I know that this is important information to convey, and I just want to make sure that it's right what's out in front of the public.
It is, I could put a caveat here that, this represents, because it's at the higher level, the same thing as 4, 6, but I can also put it there. It doesn't change that, no matter what variation you have, these, percentages, the grades are coming out somewhere in the same range, like, range and so on and so forth, but I can go ahead and get those to make it clear.
Now that we're looking at that though. So I don't care whether it's summative or spit. It's fine. So for the, it's a 50 is for doing nothing. They can get a 55 for crime.
Those are just.
Yeah, no,
examples.
I
So,
understand that, but
a range
that
of
is
scores.
a fundamental, like, just thing that makes no sense to me.
That came up, I remember back when this first started, the concept of zeros in the grade book, because I think there were a lot of parents who felt like teachers would, if, they would have, I get maybe some of the discussion point, a teacher would have a quiz that had 3 questions. You got all 3 of them wrong, got a 0, and your grade would just never recover from that. Or you turn an assignment in a day late, which, like I said, late policy, that's not the topic of conversation, but being the teacher had no late policy, etc., you got a 0, never recovered. There was also back, I remember before we started this grading policy, there was controversy about using like notebook checks or having conduct as a portion of your grade, and those sorts of things would add portions where you could potentially have a 0 in the grade book, and it would
I
enhance your grade.
totally understand that part. It's just the mathematical explanation of how nothing is a 50 and then
It's really
doing
just
stuff as a 60. It just
It's
doesn't
just a
comport with.
guardrail for averaging, because averaging can't always, won't always represent, what the kid has learned. You have someone who has like 20s and 30s, not even a 0, something below 50. And then towards the end of the semester, they're rocking it out. It won't reflect that, oh, the light bulb went off. And by the end, the student really was showing mastery, not just at the standard level, but maybe even beyond, because those prior grades.
But isn't that's the product of our choosing, or the district choosing the mathematical calculations. And then another way to do that is to just percentage later grades, kind of like that college syllabi, right?
Yeah, and we looked at that decaying average kind of thing. We looked at all of those options. But the teachers really.
But if you have like a couple, if you have like 20s, 20s, 0s, because maybe for whatever reason you're struggling the first half of the semester, and then it turns on and you get hundreds, like you still could have failed the class by average.
But I think the point is that I'm making, and maybe an assessment will show this, is we may have done a good job in ensuring that a student doesn't fail. I'm not sure we looked at the mathematical consequences of that when you get into the letter grade band. So fine, certainly the student's going to show up all year and no one wants some student to fail because they miss certain things. At the same time, how does that translate to these letter grades with mathematical numbers that some could argue have more consequence, whether it's Hope Scholarship that has a cap amount. All right.
I like the first bullet. I'm glad we're gonna do that.
Thank you very much.
And on a positive note.
No, I have to say that.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Do I have a motion to move into executive session for the purpose of discussing personal matters?
So moved.
Member Russ makes a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Member Earlier seconds the motion. The pending question is the adoption of a motion to move into executive session. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, this requires a recorded vote. Dr. Griffin will now call the roll. Board members, when your name is called, please say aye if you are in favor, no if you are opposed, or abstain if you wish to remain neutral.
Chair Coleman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Utz,
Aye.
Board Member Anderson. Aye. Board Member Herndon. Here, not present. Board Member Arier.
Aye.
The ayes, Chair Sultan Gonzalez stands at 4 ayes, 0 noes, 0 abstentions.
So the ayes have it, the motion is, the motion carries. We'll do that one.